The Art of Guerrilla Warfare, written by J.J. Tucker, narrated by Simpson. Chapter 2. The Guerrilla. The guerrilla is a one-man army. The difference between the guerrilla and the average citizen is that the guerrilla does not fear the empire. They are not afraid to die at the hands of the enemy. The guerrilla can accomplish tasks alone. They represent the underdog, the outnumbered, the outgunned. They are always one step away from the edge. They have strong minds. 90% of their success is due to their mental toughness. More is demanded from the mind than the body. They have heart in situations where the average man loses spirit. Peace does not reside in their fantasies. Their minds are occupied with thoughts of when one must attack and when one must defend. All characteristics of the enemy are studied. Its citizens, its pawns, its leaders. They discover its weakness to avoid its strengths. A guerrilla is the bullet from a sniper that strikes the head of an emperor. A guerrilla is the knife of an assassin that slits the throat of a commander. Because of its size, the empire must be out in the open. It may attempt to use guerrilla tactics to destabilize its prey, though such actions may cause confusion in the eyes of observers as to the identity of culprits. It does not protect the empire from the guerrilla. The opportunities to assault an empire are immense. It has no choice but to remain still from time to time, whereas the guerrilla cannot stop. Rest is a luxury to the guerrilla. It is a necessity to the empire. They thrive on attacking the enemy while it sleeps. It is possible for a foe to sleep with their eyes open and die in the same manner. Even blinking presents a risk when going to war against them. In order to catch an enemy off guard, one must never be off guard. To kill a man while he slumbers, an assassin must have dry eyes. The ability to persevere is an inherent trait in every guerrilla. To withstand the fist of the enemy, the face cannot be fragile. When dealing with the hard-headed, one must be accommodating. The ruthless lead the enemy by the hand and butcher them when they least suspect it. They pray to meet the enemy, while the enemy prays for an extended nap. Conventional armies criticize their unorthodox techniques. The definition of conventional is something that is socially accepted. Therefore, forces that engage in conventional warfare are socially accepted entities that engage in socially accepted activities. It is madness to believe that slaughtering thousands of non-combatants in the process of waging war is socially acceptable. The hypocrisy fuels the cause. Seeing that no outside help may come, they are self-reliant in their fight against the oppressor. The perfect guerrilla is completely independent. They do not even depend on their own brothers or sisters in arms. No mission is carried out without multiple contingency plans. They are wolves in sheep's clothing. Though their own governments fear them, it would be foolish to remove them from the populace. The difference between a guerrilla and a pawn is that one conceives what they are fighting for, the other is told. One pursues the tortoise, the other chases the cheetah. One is homeless, the other is stricken with homesickness. The pawn depends on the direction of the empire. The guerrilla carries his own compass. The empire makes the pawn disposable. The guerrilla makes himself replaceable. An empire sets fire to an entire region in hopes of killing one man. The crosshairs of a guerrilla are set upon one man to take one life. They fight for self-preservation as defined in their own eyes. It is not impossible for a guerrilla and an empire to be after the same objective. The rebel is hardened by the wilderness. The guard is accustomed to the warmth of the palace. The son of a guerrilla knows his father's killer. The son of a pawn wanders in the dark. The revolutionary longs to burn the gates of the empire and storm its capital city. The invasion of the enemy must be pushed back into the depths of hell before any design can be made on its realm. Sins do not exist on the battlefield, especially when a side representing the heavens holds the advantage and refuses to turn back or compromise. The guerrilla does not lose composure at the sight of tragedies. They cannot. Even when doing wrong, they must make others believe that they are right. If they accept the role as the villain, their own people will turn against them. A noble cause makes an enemy citizens question their state's agenda. Humans can fake happiness with a smile. There is no universal way to imitate pain. The average person cannot stomach bringing misery to the undeserving. Striking at the hearts of its citizens can force the enemy to pull back. Convincing the enemy that the hundreds of men seeking their death are in the thousands promotes the development of a superiority complex within its ranks. Psychological defense mechanisms blind fighters and cause them to swing at each other. It is rare that the guerrilla needs or desires to manipulate his brothers and sisters in arms. The Empire presents a good enough reason to fight. To prepare for war, the guerrilla approaches situations where they have to fight. In times of peace, enemies are sought and can be used for target practice. Every confrontation presents an opportunity to learn. Surrender is not used to admit defeat. Giving up is a strategic move. It can put the enemy to sleep and present an ideal situation. The survival of their movement depends on secrecy and stealth. The Empire cannot know their position. Its reach is too long. There is always a high bounty on their plans. When every man's life depends on the plan, there are no informers. No witnesses are left for the enemy to question. Storing plans within one's memory is preferable to documentation. Though much speed comes from the use of written communication, hearing voices in person is preferable. It is not uncommon for guerrillas to create their own language. They are skilled mind readers and meteorologists. Eye contact between guerrillas is worth more than dialogue between pawns. A closed mouth receives the same treatment as an open mouth. Any guerrilla that falls into the hands of the enemy deserves and welcomes a painful death. Secrets are kept through the use of misdirection, smoke and mirrors, and false flags. Perverting the plans of the enemy can cause it to waste resources. Moving its forces to assault empty strongholds makes the Empire vulnerable to attack. Carrying out attacks behind smoke screens helps avoid heavy artillery. The foolish go against tanks with rocks. The skilled deflect bullets with swords. Distractions are used to flank enemies and hit them from behind. The effectiveness of a false flag is dependent upon how well its participants keep their mouths shut. Silence is deadly. The dead are silent. Every action is carried out with stealth. If the enemy can follow their trail, they halt all movement. If the enemy can follow their scent, they ambush them. No footprints are left in the sand. The bodies of enemies are dropped on invisible father beds. Weapons are chosen by their decibel. When the aim is to cause confusion, deafening arms are excellent. When the mission depends on silence, suppressed weapons lead to success. Stealth inspires great fear. Because they are unpredictable, the enemy must continually change its strategies. Bureaucracies are not flexible and do not cater to independent thought. When confronted with a variable such as the guerrilla, they tend to move slowly. They seek to hit an opponent's blind spot. Pawns live in a constant state of alertness, attempting to see what cannot be seen. When far away, pawns believe the guerrilla is within arm's reach. Face to face with the guerrilla, a pawn thinks he still has time to prepare. When an empire wages war on its prey, its own citizens are susceptible to retribution. Through the use of coverts and infiltrators, a foe's citizens can be touched. However, this sort of activity can strengthen the hand of an empire. Citizens agree to all sorts of tax increases when they believe their lives are in immediate danger. Empires may use false flags to garner this sort of support. A change in the administration may end an invasion if it is driven completely by the personality of one man. To boost morale, Guerrillas may reveal their hand in an emperor's downfall. This may place them on the radars of other empires, even if their case is just. Using stealth to remove leaders eliminates an immediate threat and buys time to gain the best position on the battlefield. The emperor represents the mind of the enemy. Its citizens represents his heart. Pawns represent its body. Chapter 3. Avoidance. Avoiding the enemy is essential in guerrilla warfare. The empire has the advantage. Many men cannot admit that certain things are beyond their dominance. A guerrilla knows the value that comes from swallowing one's pride. There is a natural impulse in a man to go against an enemy even when their shortcomings are visible to all. Letting go of this impulse takes practice and discipline. Men of intelligence realize it is a necessity at times to lower oneself to rise above enemies. Overconfidence is an even more deadly attribute than pride. A man who thinks he is unbeatable does not want to hide. Yet disappearing is a must in guerrilla warfare. It is better that overconfidence belong to the empire. To overcome pride, the guerrilla sees the world for what it truly is and expects the worst from enemies. No excuses are made for an enemy's strengths. It is undeniable that some men are smarter, bigger, stronger, and faster than others. To make excuses for another man's superiority is like dunking one's head into water to avoid seeing the sun. Accepting the fact that the enemy has the ability to swiftly gain victory provides motivation to search for back doors to victory. When a stronger opponent is identified, they are analyzed for weak points. Eagerness to attack must be calmed in guerrilla warfare. Due to the scarcity of resources, there may be only one opportunity to assault the enemy. Patience is required to seize the right openings and ignore false ones. A guerrilla is at peace with his abilities and his plan. Insecurities drive a man of uncertainty to suicide. If a man cannot see his own reflection, he cannot see the enemy at his rear. The fear of criticism from one's peers can drive a man to stick his foot in the road without looking. Some feel they must attack or be labeled a coward. They must stand their ground or be considered weak. These thoughts do not plague the mind of a guerrilla. The success of the mission is of the utmost importance. If the role of the coward must be donned to murder upon, so be it. If territory must be abandoned to shoot through the back of an emperor's head, so be it. Only a pigeon is concerned about what other pigeons think. While they wait for bread, a guerrilla is on the hunt. They place their hands out, a guerrilla takes what he wants. Their opinions are stale and worthless. The guerrilla avoids confrontation where they're at a disadvantage. The empire seeks confrontation where they hold the advantage. This is the essence of guerrilla warfare. It may seem that the guerrilla is bound to spend more time fleeing and the empire more time chasing. Not everything is as it seems. The easiest way to lead a man into a trap is to make him your pursuer. The empire may or may not have the advantage as it pursues. The truth is revealed when the guerrilla turns around to face the enemy. Even when at a disadvantage, the guerrilla holds the advantage because they know their position at all times. Whereas the empire, because of its zealousness in giving chase, is more likely to be led into traps. It is human nature and basic strategic policy to avoid an enemy's strengths. A competent combatant does not aim at armor. He targets exposed body parts. In hand-to-hand combat, the skilled fighter studies his opponents before engaging him. If his opponent is quick, he does not contest his quickness. If his opponent is strong, he does not contest his strength. The capable fighter uses speed against the robust and brawn against the swift. A guerrilla operates in the same manner. He avoids the empire's strengths and positions himself to use his own. Its prey lacks the resources to confront the empire using conventional means. Empires determine what form of warfare is socially accepted because they have the power to convene and make rules amongst themselves. Guerrilla warfare is defined as indirect warfare. Things that are indirect do not follow a straight line, course, or path. Yet, most bullets that hit pawns are not the result of ricochets. When an empire storms a city, it does so with the loud rouses to inspire fear. The guerrilla proves that noise is unnecessary to arouse such feelings. The empire announces its arrival with gunfire and bombs. The guerrilla reveals their presence with the appearance of dead pawns. Because of the empire's loud voice, the guerrilla can often avoid its clutches. The empire does not moderate its pride because it believes temperance is a sign of weakness. When it attacks, it wants the world to know it did so, even when covert means are used. The humble man has the upper hand against the man who refuses to lower his head. In order to operate, a guerrilla avoids being identified. They keep their true identity a secret. The empire is kept off guard by not knowing who its enemies are. When dealing with rebels, one of the primary objectives of the empire is to discover their identities. Knowing a man's name is the first step in determining his weakness. With the name comes history. A man's background influences his strategies. A man will use his greatest skills against opponents. If the enemy learns his identity, they discover his strengths and use those against him. Setting fire to the past is erasing all traces of one's history. Family and friends are no more. All documents revealing a true identity are destroyed. A guerrilla becomes a ghost among the living. It takes a strong will to let go of every person and thing that makes a person who they are, but it is necessary to avoid the guillotine. These actions are not only done to protect the guerrilla, the ones closest to him are susceptible to being used as bait to draw him out. One with no family or friends easily hides in the daylight. If already unknown, it is easy to stay in the shadows by not pursuing fame. The best guerrillas blend in with the crowd. A renowned individual can only be a guerrilla if they are never seen participating in acts or in the vicinity of acts that support the movement. It is the policy of every guerrilla to leave no witnesses. When carrying out a mission, the potential for eyewitnesses is thoroughly considered. Eyewitnesses present too much risk. They usually present the only lead to the discovery of an identity. Witnesses are never bribed for their silence. As long as a man breathes, there is a potential to be exposed. Paying for silence does not guarantee a return on the investment. The empire can be very persuasive when dealing with non-combatants. If an untrained person cannot withstand mere threats of bodily harm, how can they resist revealing sensitive information under torture? The guerrilla prefers to avoid witnesses. Dealing with them brings too many complications. They guard their identity with their life and seek out the identity of their enemies. The same destruction that an empire can inflict using a guerrilla's identity can be unleashed upon them when the identities of pawns are discovered. A man with no face is more feared than a masked man. The guerrilla avoids the enemy's strength through flanking and rear attacks. An enemy's area of strength is considered its front. Flanking is striking one or both of the enemy's sides. It is done when the enemy's front is preoccupied, distracted, or disabled. This maneuver is used in hopes of surrounding the enemy. When the enemy is in pursuit of another force, being directly attacked or on the move, its front is preoccupied and its sides and rear can be attacked. An opponent can be distracted by forcing it to defend its flanks or its rear. The time it takes to respond to distractions makes its front vulnerable. An enemy's front can be disabled due to malfunction, miscommunication on the part of pawns, or some other action not caused by the guerrilla. This situation is approached with caution because golden opportunities can be ploys. If the situation is sincere, the enemy can be decimated through flanking maneuvers. Rear attacks are executed when the enemy's front is unable to react in time or blind. Striking an enemy from behind is done when it is convenient or necessary to avoid being overwhelmed. Assailing the enemy's rear is done quickly. It is not allowed to reposition itself. When the guerrilla has the element of surprise on their side, they can use a mixture of flanking and rear attacks to decimate their rivals. A strength is a concentration of advantages. One pistol aimed at one man represents an advantage. 6 pistols aimed at one man represents a strength. When the aforementioned pistols are surrounded by 20 men, they must be aimed in 6 different directions. The shooters may hit multiple targets, but they will not overwhelm the survivors. Avoiding an enemy's strengths can be achieved through dividing its forces. Each part of the conventional army is dependent upon each other. When a pawn meets a guerrilla in battle, they are a part versus a whole. Staring into the eyes of a guerrilla is like looking into the eyes of 10,000 men. When the enemy's front rotates, so does the guerrilla. If the enemy has eyes on all sides, its attention is drawn to one area. Rotation takes speed, discipline, and endurance. These traits are necessary to avoid moving fronts and strike the enemy's weak spots. The movement never shakes hands with the enemy. They force them to bow. An empire never compromises. Any offers to negotiate or make a deal are avoided. When the enemy cannot get his hands on a guerrilla, it attempts to draw them out with peace deals. It may take several years or decades, but empires eventually renege on every deal made. Empires do not take defeat lightly. They harbor ill feelings toward guerrillas longer than they hold grudges against competitors. The guerrilla compels the enemy to surrender by making the possibility of victory more unlikely. An empire is given no choice but to end its campaign. When fighting for territory, the battle does not end until every piece of land is relinquished. The enemy is uprooted from the soil and cast away into the seas. If allowed a presence after battle ends, the empire will undermine its prey in every way possible. When an empire is banished, the populace is forever reminded of its evil to prevent its return. Empires that cannot directly dominate their prey sometimes resort to romancing citizens through social means. When the people cannot be enslaved through the use of weapons, empires attempt to influence their culture and social structure. Mediums such as books, movies, music, television, and social networking sites allow an empire to gain access to the minds of citizens and influence the way they think. By controlling all means of information and communication, an empire can turn citizens of an endangered nation against their final line of defense. In order to see this form of attack coming, the guerrilla avoids immersing themselves in the waves of the media and pop culture. They believe half of what they see and none of what they hear. Capture and ambushes are avoided by staying aware at all times. Every avenue in life is treated like a war zone. They do not prepare for fight. They are always prepared to fight. The empire is not human, so the guerrilla must be inhumane. Many men fight hard to avoid being labeled abnormal. The guerrilla does not strive to be normal. He strives to be victorious. Chapter 4. Concealment. The guerrilla is a master of concealment. They force the empire to shoot into the shadows. Knowing how to hide well garners the element of surprise. The guerrilla surrounds their enemies with darkness. The crowd presents a tremendous place to hide. Citizens of a nation under siege resemble the guerrilla. Unlike pawns, the guerrilla has no uniform. All citizens are at war with the empire, even though many may be comfortable living in denial. The cause of the guerrilla is for the people. Without them, the people are enslaved and eradicated without resistance. If they do not volunteer to oppose the enemy, the masses are drafted. Those unwilling or unable to engage in combat are assigned the duty of providing cover and concealment. In the world of conventional warfare, massacring civilians is severely frowned upon, if not outlawed by treaties. The crowd cannot be used as a hiding place if the empire will kill civilians without restraint or consequences. Though the guerrilla fights for the people, innocents are hostages caught in the crossfire. They are valuable assets to both sides of the conflict. Using the crowd works best when they are complicit in the activities of the movement. A guerrilla is always on the move. Everything involved in their movement is mobile. A network among the people provides secure passages. The crowd can provide safe houses and transportation for weapons, supplies, and communication. Weapons are a precious commodity in guerrilla warfare. The Empire pursues disarmament of the cause to protect the lives of pawns and freely oppress enemies. Artillery is moved as frequently as the guerrilla to avoid being confiscated. Weapon caches are hid within the crowd during the preliminary stages of an invasion. It is harder to hide weapons in the crowd under an occupation or police state because homes and vehicles are subject to random searches. Supplies not directly related to warfare, such as food and tools, are placed with non-combatants for safekeeping. When operating as separate units, guerrillas can use the homes of civilians to leave messages for counterparts. The danger that comes with this tactic is that the citizens can be coerced into revealing information. The crowd can also be used to transport messages by vehicle. Using the homes and vehicles of civilians to conceal guerrillas is safe only if they do not stay in one place for too long. By keeping an ear on the movements of the enemy, the guerrilla knows which civilian areas are available for use. Taking a defensive stance behind the crowd is done when on the run or being hunted by the Empire. The cause is considered more valuable than the life of one innocent. The lives of two non-combatants are placed above the complexion of one mission. Every non-combatant murdered by the Empire promotes the cause. Fellow citizens are not intentionally targeted. Enemies can find success by turning the people against the guerrilla. The freedom fighter tag must be attached to every member and activity of the movement to avoid backlash. The anger of the people is directed at the Empire to gain their support and attract outside forces reliable enough to stop its invasion through military or diplomatic means. Taking cover behind the innocent is not done maliciously. It is done with careful consideration and tact. When the people are willing to hide the guerrilla, they are encouraged to not take up arms. The Empire labels every armed inhabitant as a direct member of the movement. The guerrilla cannot hide amongst peers. When the people are against the guerrilla or unwilling to protect them, their involvement in concealing the presence of fighters is kept hidden. They are convinced that there are no guerrillas within their area as the movement finds safety behind them. The Empire takes everything away from the people and attempts to use the guerrilla as currency. They offer rewards for the whereabouts and identities of rebels. When the people are in poverty, many cooperate. When abuse by the Empire is overwhelming, cooperation is not bought so easily. Poverty is not considered a reasonable excuse. Anyone who willingly assists the Empire in the capture or death of a guerrilla is an enemy. This agreement is not betrayal. Taking active steps to eliminate the individuals fighting against the oppressor is viewed as an offense worthy of death. An empire may bombard a territory with 100,000 inhabitants due to the presence of 5,000 guerrillas, with the hopes of turning the people against the movement. More often than not, such activities create more guerrilla fighters. The birth of more fighters is sometimes the goal of the Empire. With competitors always keeping a close eye on the Empire, it can never have too many excuses for devouring its prey. Taking an offensive stand behind the crowd can be a recruiting tool used by the movement. When their numbers are low, the few can motivate the many. All it takes is one bullet to create revolutionaries. The Empire is better suited to trace a guerrilla when they strike than when they are silent. They reveal their location when they hit the Empire from behind the crowd. These sorts of attacks are more effective when there are multiple crowds to shift behind. When there are many places to hide, the Empire thinly spreads its resources as it combs through various territories. Hitting the Empire from point A forces it to direct its attention to that area. Following up the assault from point A with the strike from point C forces the Empire to turn its head rapidly and possibly break its neck in the process. The crowd is used to draw out the Empire. An area that attempts to resist the Empire gets a hands-on approach. Striking the Empire from the crowd forces it to send its pawns to respond. Because they are expendable to the Empire, pawns are tasked with finding guerrillas in the crowd. If the guerrilla only reveals their presence when taking the life of a pawn, the only way a pawn can complete their mission is through death. If the vanity of the empire causes it to feel comfortable enough to place its leader in shooting range, guns are placed in the crowd. It is the epitome of arrogance to believe that one can oppress a people and be safe from their wrath. The guerrilla implements ceasefires to make the empire feel comfortable in its pride. If the emperor leaves his place to shake hands with his conquered opponents, he can be greeted with a knife in the back. With guerrillas in the midst, there is no way for an empire to conquer a region without killing every single inhabitant. If an empire is foolish enough to attempt such a sin, it opens its borders for invasion and attack. The guerrilla considers the empire's fear of its competitors when it decides to use the crowd as cover. The repercussions that accompany extreme bullying tactics are not worth the treasures they can acquire. A guerrilla keeps an eye on diplomatic relationships and foreign policies when determining the best use of a crowd in warfare. The environment is as deadly as explosives when used properly. When an empire sends out pawns on its behalf to a foreign nation, they are immediately at a disadvantage. The inhabitant is always more familiar with the geography of their homeland than the invader. No matter how much intelligence is gathered on a location, documentation pales in comparison to first-hand knowledge. With a better understanding of their nation's topography, the guerrilla can make use of the environment in their strategies. If an enemy is slow to respond, open areas are used to harass them. Examples of open areas are deserts and bodies of water. Large, slow-moving enemies can be hit by small parties of great speed in these environments. Supply units and high-value targets are usually targeted in open areas. The goal is to disrupt the empire's sense of security when hitting these units. An open area presents many escape routes. In order to capture them, the enemy would have to divide its forces or divert from its route. Targets in these areas are hit only if their primary objective is not capturing or killing the guerrilla. Open area targets can be hit without fear of a long pursuit. When a guerrilla can quickly come out of hiding and return just as fast, they do so. Aggressive adversaries are led into closed areas. The wilderness and the city are two examples of closed areas. These locales provide a variety of places to hide. Closed areas have a detrimental effect on pawns. Behind every tree or building could lurk an enemy. Guerrillas use closed environments to slaughter numerous enemies or capture them. They become one with the atmosphere. The enemy is surrounded if they do not turn back. Closed areas are vulnerable to bombardment. However, it is rare that an empire overtly sacrifices its own men to possibly hit the enemy. The guerrilla only remains in a closed area if the enemy is being lured into an ambush or unaware of their presence. If the enemy plays the waiting game, calls in reinforcements or fire support, a closed area becomes a guerrilla's coffin. Closed areas work best when there is one route available for the enemy to retreat and another route available for the guerrilla to flee. The guerrilla is also capable of hiding behind weather conditions. If possible, the enemy is studied to discover its reaction and response to certain weather conditions. The climate can be used to assist assaults and escapes. Clear skies with a cool breeze cause the enemy to relax. Pawns are humans, not immune to the lure of the environment. A beautiful day can put the most disciplined fighter at ease. Striking the enemy early, during a good day, causes panic and a weak response because they subconsciously expect to enjoy nice weather. They feel entitled to it. Brief hit and runs are executed when the weather is extremely comfortable. A rainstorm makes the enemy believe that the opposition will not show up. The reaction to rain by the human race is quite peculiar. In every society, men and women can be seen running to avoid being doused by the clouds. The sound of raindrops hitting the ground puts pawns at ease. Thunder conceals the echo of gunfire and explosives. Mankind believes that rain brings the world to a halt. But a guerrilla is not a man. Precipitation does not put a damper on their plans. Though severe snowstorms leave footprints, they hinder the ability to see clearly and move freely. When prepared for the weather, and the enemy can be lured from the safety of their fortifications, a snowstorm can be used as an ally. Chapter 5. Surprise Attacks. Surprise attacks are used to harass the enemy, eliminate high-value targets, and capture opponents. Enemies are usually ambushed from afar. The guerrilla only gets close when superior in numbers, to verify the demise of a target, or to capture a prize. An ambush forces the Empire to respond to a distraction. Moments of confusion are used to drown the enemy under the weight of an assault. The enemy meets certain death if it attempts to confront an ambush head-on. It is encouraged to flee or die. The element of surprise is the guerrilla's closest ally. When the enemy is ambushed, the first thing it attempts to do is find the culprits. The time it takes to locate the guerrilla places the enemy seconds away from death. When done to harass, the enemy's flanks and rear are the only areas directly hit by an ambush. The purpose is to disrupt the unity of the Empire, pick off a few pawns, and place a cloud of paranoia over the troops. Guerrillas prefer to hit supply convoys and patrols with light ambushes. Though they may travel with security forces or receive similar training as infantry units, the focus of supply units is transporting supplies. Infantry units are paid to fight. Supply units are paid to deliver supplies. The goal of a supply unit is to get from point A to point B. The goal of a light ambush is to make a convoy's journey as difficult as possible. Disrupting supply lines interrupts the plans of the Empire. It must think twice about every move it makes within the region. Security has to be multiplied to protect supply routes, draining the Empire's resources. Mobile patrol units are vulnerable to ambushes because they travel the same route every day. This allows time to set up the perfect trap. Variations in patrol routes may be added to confuse enemies. However, these adjustments also follow discernible patterns. Patrol units assigned to protect structures or small areas are limited in their ability to respond to an ambush. Being prepared for an attack and waiting for an attack are two different things. When a fighter is prepared, they are motivated by recent training or a recent attack. When a fighter awaits an attack, it is because they have not received training or seen action for a long period of time. New additions to patrol divisions are least likely to expect an ambush. Their inexperience with the environment makes them vulnerable. A pawn that knows the country well can mentally prepare himself for attacks. Enemies can be caught off guard during events. Celebrations and festivals lift the spirit. It is difficult for a fighter to get into battle mode with booze and rich foods clogging their system. The starving man approaches combat with less reservations than the well-fed and intoxicated because they do not come from a place of contentment. Life for the guerrilla is cold in the wilderness. Life for the pawn is warm behind the castle walls. The theater of war is hotter than hell. Only the guerrilla finds more comfort in war than at home. Ambushing the enemy during an event brings the fire of Hades into heaven. One moment, there is laughter and joy. The next second, there is chaos and turmoil. Holiday festivities are the most vulnerable events. Even when at war, people try their best to live normally. A pawn has no right to live a normal life in the middle of a war. They set themselves up to be ambushed by attempting to do so. Though striking during events makes a strong statement, there is no time to loiter. Because there is a high concentration of pawns, it does not take long for them to muster a response team. The disorder that accompanies mass injuries and casualties can conceal escapes. The heavy ambush is used to capture or eliminate high-value and symbolic targets. A high-value target is one of strategic significance. The removal or acquirement of such a target provides a substantial advantage. Like the light ambush, the heavy ambush is initially directed towards the enemy's flanks and rear. However, the latter consists of providing no escape route for the enemy. High-value and symbolic targets may determine the fate of the cause. Therefore, these objectives are only pursued after meticulous planning. Examples of high-value targets are communication units, weapons convoys, engineers, and small teams in pursuit of the guerrilla. The goal is to stop the advancement of the enemy. High-value targets represent the tip of the Empire's spear. Cutting off communication is akin to slitting the throat of the enemy. The opportunity to destroy equipment related to transmitting information is never ignored. Capturing communications personnel is done when their services can be used to manipulate the enemy or obtain information. Destroying the enemy's weapons grants an obvious advantage. However, confiscating its arsenal is preferred. Having a limited supply of weapons, the guerrilla appreciates every rifle they can get their hands on. Fortifications are needed to house pawns, supplies, and weapons. It is easier to knock down defense structures before they are built. To eliminate an engineer is to uproot the seed of the enemy. Small groups of pursuers are vulnerable to the heavy ambush. When hunted, the guerrilla maintains control of their trail. The scent of bacon attracts the dog. The smell of garlic repels the cat. The path of the enemy is determined to successfully set up a heavy ambush. Though strength in numbers is not always on their side, this sort of ambush demands support from many guerrillas. When manpower is limited, firepower capable of overwhelming the enemy is used. Capturing or eliminating symbolic targets boosts the morale of the movement. The Empire's leaders and high-ranking military officers are symbolic targets. A heavy ambush is used to strike symbolic targets due to the amount of security that accompanies their presence. The difference between the security that surrounds the Empire's leaders and those that guard its military officers is one of quantity versus quality. Political leaders can request as many armed men to accompany them as desired, while military officials have the advantage of traveling with more loyal fighters. A heavy ambush is the only way to drill through a large or loyal security force. The response of the enemy and the effect on the cause determine whether a symbolic target is kidnapped or killed. If the Empire can be forced to negotiate, the target is captured. When forced to negotiate with the guerrilla, the Empire validates the movement's power. Some targets can serve as trophies. The capture of enemies who have made victory difficult motivate fighters to persevere. The presence of a symbolic target in their camp provides visual proof that victory is on the side of the movement. Symbolic targets are not taken hostage if their capture would lead to too much attention from the Empire. Though the Empire always has its eyes fixed upon destroying the guerrilla, the strategic principles of concealment and avoidance are placed above capturing symbolic targets. If any of these principles cannot be observed as the result of an action, the action is not taken. A symbolic target is killed if their death moves the cause forward. When an emperor is not supported by his people, it may be possible to push back an invasion by eliminating him. If it seems like there is no way to push back the Empire, exterminating powerful figures encourages the movement to keep fighting until victory is achieved. Diplomats that are not citizens of the Empire are not targeted for ambushes of any kind. It is not wise to increase enemies when already at a disadvantage. Peacekeepers are embraced to a certain extent. However, they are never brought into the fold. They are used as tools to push back the enemy. Foreign citizens are not harmed. They are aggressively informed that their presence in the war zone could unintentionally lead to their demise. If citizens of the Empire place themselves in the homeland of the guerrilla, they are given stern warnings to leave. Kidnapping or killing them may establish support for the Empire's aggression. When many of its citizens are against the war, the ones within hostile territory are ambushed to place political pressure on the Empire. Light ambushes are executed from a distance. The guerrilla hits the Empire and robs it of the opportunity to swing back. The gap between the two sides allows the guerrilla to hide and flee after a strike. When the enemy is well guarded, the guerrilla keeps their distance. They use weapons capable of completely destroying the enemy. If the target is to be captured, all defensive capabilities are eliminated before advancing. Close-quarter ambushes are carried out when the numbers are on their side. When the enemy is outmatched, the guerrilla reserves the right to kill or capture as they see fit. Multiple units are used to increase the speed of heavy ambushes. One unit takes a position from afar and the other up close. The farthest team provides support as the front line captures or eliminates the target. Though all members of a unit are important, the least valuable fighters are placed on the front line in close-quarter ambushes. This does not mean that those on the front line are less skilled than others. Their efforts are just needed more in the present than the future. The front line is where most guerrillas begin their careers. Ambushes are used to remind the enemy that the country belongs to the guerrilla. By launching surprise attacks, they can make the enemy believe a force of 100 men are 1,000 fighters. Surprise attacks are repeated in the same location if it is a definite weak spot. When the enemy has foreknowledge of an ambush, it can give the guerrilla a taste of their own medicine. If executed with precision, there is no escaping a counter ambush. When an ambush is reversed, the only move left is taking out as many enemy fighters as possible before being wiped out. Chapter 6: Espionage. To make important decisions regarding war, the enemy's plans must be known, because its cause is not directly tied to the survival of its people. There are spots in an empire's regime that will leak intelligence. The guerrilla appreciates all information related to the enemy's movements. Their war is better fought orbiting the empire. Politics can determine the enemy's condition on the battlefield. Information that may cause backlash against an invader's regime is aggressively sought after. Intelligence regarding the personalities, characteristics, and emotional status of pawns is useful in planning attacks to unsettle the enemy. All empires are subject to dissension and mutiny. Knowing the reasons for internal conflicts can help recruit the enemy to work against the enemy. Convincing a foe to commit suicide is done without leaving fingerprints. Information about the enemy's allies, neighbors, and rivals can all contribute to gaining the advantage over it. Forcing the empire to respond to more important endeavors or dilemmas can force it to end an invasion. Locations of high value and symbolic targets are treasures hidden within the camp of the empire. They may be well-guarded secrets or the topic of idle conversation. The only way to know is by getting close to the enemy. An ambush is successful when the guerrilla possesses reliable information. An escape is impossible when the empire has overheard the plot. Knowing what the enemy knows about the cause allows the movement to select sufficient hiding places and eliminate informants. To learn all its secrets, one must penetrate the enemy's walls. When its fortress cannot be pierced by arms, its gates are unlocked from the inside. The spy is used to scale the walls of the enemy. Infiltration is done in secret. When the enemy is as unpredictable as the guerrilla, sitting beside them allows their face to be read. A smirk cannot be seen from afar. Neither can a look of distress. There are many ways to get close to the enemy. The easiest path consists of mirroring its appearance. A man from a luminous nation shines in regions of darkness. The clothes worn by the rich look peculiar when draped upon the poor. When the enemy and the guerrilla share physical traits, appropriating the proper garments allows a spy to enter hostile territory. Suitable appearance shields the guerrilla from being spotted at first glance. Acceptable behavior is searched for upon second look. The way a man walks indicates his birthplace more than the sound of his speech. To live in the peripheral of the enemy, one must be an exceptional actor. When a man resembles another in appearance and behavior, connections through shared ideas are sought. The enemy's thoughts on any topic are valuable. To get the attention of a physicist, the topic of conversation must be science. To catch the eyes of an adulterer, a beautiful woman is flaunted. Learning about the enemy involves more than counting its artillery. People are most talkative while engaging in their hobbies. Mimicking their interests in these activities allows one to extract information without force. Ideas regarding faith can be imitated by conducting thorough research. Most religions on earth are simply systems based on text and interpretations of text. Literacy and reading comprehension skills are all that is required to blend in with members of a congregation. Being able to understand different interpretations of religious texts is necessary to adopt the guise of a devout follower. The guerrilla is capable of straying from their belief system to bury the enemy. An empire is a godless entity, a cold, demonic machine. When playing against evil men, cheating is permitted. Personal relationships can be used to gain access to the enemy, though it puts the introducer at risk. Lovers, family, friends, co-workers, and classmates in the social sphere of the enemy are valuable assets. No one is truly neutral during a time of war. An infiltration mission can take several days or decades to complete. Information that can immediately impact the war is sought out with speed. Patience is used on assignments that can lead to future victories. A guerrilla can be placed in the world of an enemy as a youth, to complete a mission 30 years later. The task of infiltration is assigned to the spy. There are 4 types of spies sent to gather information on the enemy: willing spies, unwilling spies, knowing spies, and unknowing spies. Willing spies have the ability to gain access to the enemy undetected. They are trustworthy because they have been vetted by their fellow fighters and have proven their loyalty to the cause. To betray their brothers and sisters is to betray themselves. Willing spies are used to gather information, sabotage the enemy, and assassinate high-value or symbolic targets. They place the success of the mission above their own lives. After crossing enemy lines, willing spies only return to camp after completing their objective or in a body bag. Defectors are also used as willing spies. They are only employed when they are proven to not be double agents. Instinct alone is not used to allow defectors into the camp. Any enemy who offers their services is placed in a position to commit an act that no member of the Empire would carry out. A defector proves themselves or is interrogated, then executed. When a double agent directly makes contact, it means the location of the movement has been compromised. Non-combatants are not used as willing spies. Citizens who have not taken up arms are looked upon with suspicion when they request to become spies. A person willing to spy should be willing to die on the front lines. Information obtained by agents of other nations and empires is not accepted immediately. Unless verified as accurate, their data is useless. It is rare that foreign individuals willingly provide material support to the cause. Information willingly provided by outside sources is unreliable until proven true. Unwilling spies are individuals who are coerced into spying. There is a potential for them to lose a person or thing they value dearly. If they do not agree to the terms stipulated to gain their cooperation, whatever they have to lose is lost. Reluctant infiltrators are the most untrustworthy of all agents. They can be easily turned against the movement in exchange for protection. Because they are not enthusiastic about their mission, they will not go the extra mile to gather information, whereas a willing spy will seize all opportunities to do good for the cause. Whatever is seized to employ an unwilling spy must be a force strong enough to drive them into becoming a willing spy. These individuals are not chosen due to a shortage of spies. They are chosen because they possess something that allows them to get close to the enemy. Unwilling spies are not privy to any secrets. They are expendable. They can be placed in dangerous situations without mercy. If they are captured, they have no vital intelligence to give the enemy. Unwilling spies are not kept alive after the completion of their assignment. Whatever they had to gain as a result of their success dies with them. Indisposed moles represent a scent for the Empire to follow. Even though it is unlikely that they could be used by the Empire to deliver damaging blows, the guerrilla's policy of remaining hidden does not allow unwilling spies to be spared. Both willing and unwilling spies are knowing spies. When entering enemy territory, they are aware that they are completing a mission on behalf of the cause. Unknowing spies are oblivious to their role in covert operations. They have direct access to the Empire. Attempting to openly recruit them would compromise the mission. Uninformed spies are chosen for their naivety or inability to discover that they are being used. They speak to the guerrilla without knowing their identity. Willing spies sometimes complete their mission by using unknowing spies. The use of technology allows devices to secretly be placed upon and removed from their person. This manner of operating allows the guerrilla to place their eyes and ears behind enemy lines. When an unknowing spy's personal devices are accessible, these items can be rated for intelligence without leaving a trace. The unknowing spy is the most valuable agent employed. When direct interaction with these individuals is possible, they can be manipulated into committing acts of sabotage. Depending on the relationship an unknowing spy has with the movement, they can be directed to do things in enemy territory, such as delivering messages to allies and unwittingly planting bombs. A seemingly harmless act, like gossiping, could be used to gain information about targets. A good spy knows how to influence people using their charms. The Empire has the resources to employ many spies. It can use its riches to pay its enemies' citizens for information. If money is not enough to prompt cooperation, families can be threatened with execution to gain compliance. The capture of one of its spies runs down the resources of the empire if it attempts search and rescue efforts. It also grants the guerrilla a symbolic victory. When there are political consequences associated with sabotage or an attack on its prey, the empire only uses citizens of the endangered nation as spies. This allows it to keep its hands clean while conducting covert operations. Bribing citizens to become spies does not fit into their budget, but the guerrilla's policies of concealment and secrecy make their lines as hard to penetrate as castle walls. Though, once breached, it only takes one good spy to dismantle every stronghold under their control. The empire has more to lose in the use of spies. This presents an advantage that is not overlooked. Spies lose their humanity when they plant their feet on hostile terrain. Rifles and grenades become their siblings. In the game of espionage, facts override emotions and opinions. Chapter 7. Arms Acquisition. A war cannot be fought without sufficient weaponry. The Empire is capable of producing weapons on a mass scale. It can create millions of firearms, bullets, and explosives. Luckily for the guerrilla, each man can only hold one gun at a time. Their main interest is the number of pawns faced in battle. The guerrilla does not concern themselves with competing in an arms race with the enemy. They seek to place at least one weapon in the hand of each fighter. One man with 100 rounds can take out 10 enemies. One man with one grenade can eliminate 20 foes. Guerrillas are expected to down multiple enemies during confrontations. Each pawn killed represents a weapon without an operator. When an invasion is imminent, weapons are quickly gathered to fend off the intruders. Arms are initially received or taken from the government and private dealers within the country. The first move of the empire is destroying the infrastructure of its enemy. Allowing guerrillas to secure their weapons can be an endangered nation's last act of defiance and only hope of regaining their territory. If the government is at odds with the movement, the guerrilla assaults their own countrymen to retrieve arsenal. They can hit their own nation faster than the empire because they live behind its defenses. The weapons of private dealers and citizens are confiscated if needed. Though weapons can be accepted from trustworthy sources, arms are considered better stolen to protect the cause and non-combatants. Individuals who willingly supply the movement with munitions are subject to interrogation, torture, and death. Being robbed by masked men leaves the provider blameless and the identities of the guerrillas concealed. A well-supplied guerrilla unit prefers to leave compatriots armed. After the fall of their government, many are too afraid to stand up against the empire. But there is only so much mistreatment a person can take. Each armed citizen can take action against the enemy if adequately provoked. When the weapons of civilians are in danger of being confiscated, the guerrilla removes them from their possession. Weapons can be obtained from nations, groups, or foreign arms dealers through secret alliances. Nations that secretly contribute weapons to guerrillas do so to destabilize the empire's military, economy, and pride. They may also provide support for sinister purposes, such as setting up a future invasion or economic gain. Using the guerrilla to wage a covert war on an empire protects a competitor's territory and the people from attacks. Its allies and citizens may be against war with the empire. A secret alliance removes liability from the side of the competitor and protects its political standing. If the empire sustains enough damage in battle against the guerrilla, its territory will be defenseless against the competitor's invasion. Some competitors seek to take control of the empire's economy. Pursuing the movement is an expensive and time-consuming project. The more time an empire spends at war with the guerrilla force, the more resources it exhausts. Secretly destabilizing an empire's economy puts its competition in a position to offer high-interest loans. When one nation becomes indebted to another, the creditor can influence the debtor's policies. Money and power are synonymous in war. Without enough funds to pay pawns, build fortifications, and acquire weapons, the empire's defenses are weakened. It loses the ability to seize objectives and interfere in the affairs of others. Competitors may confidentially provide artillery to humiliate or retaliate against an empire. In the political arena, appearances are everything. If an empire appears to be weak, their alliance will not be sought after in the global community. Alliances allow nations to influence international law and treaties. A humiliation on the battlefield can isolate an empire. When a competitor has been slighted in some way, they seek retaliation. Making the empire look fragile against the guerrilla can satisfy their need for revenge. A secret alliance may present a dangerous situation for the guerrilla. If the supplier has plans on invading their country, they may just be providing weapons to remove one empire and replace it with another. By dealing with the guerrilla, the supplier gains the advantage of knowing how weapons are transported into the country. They can cut off these supply lines if they decide to invade the country in the future. For weapons manufacturers and dealers, war is the ultimate payday. Foreign arms dealers may do business with the guerrilla, even if they do not believe in the cause. Foreign dealers act in secret to avoid scrutiny from their home nations and the empire. There may be laws set in place that make selling weapons to guerrillas illegal. A secret alliance gives the guerrilla the advantage. While they deal in secret to avoid the wrath of the empire, the weapon supplier does so to circumvent the laws and treaties. The consequence of this pact being exposed is an end to the guerrilla's stream of firepower and immobilization of the contributor's financial progression. The involvement of a nation or weapons merchant in a scandal negatively impacts their future trade opportunities. There is no loyalty between a guerrilla and a weapon supplier. If a provider is knocked off, a new one is sought. Agreements are not made or honored with silent partners, if there is no obligation to do so. The transaction ends when weapons are received. Outsiders are not fully trusted. A confidential ally can turn their back on the cause any day. There is always a risk of betrayal when receiving weapons in secret. Anytime a meeting is arranged with an outsider, it could be an ambush. If there is no obligation to be faithful and no reason to fear reprisal, a weapons supplier can be robbed. When fugitives do business with criminals, there is no honor among thieves. Public supporters of the movement send weapons in broad daylight. These contributors are usually in a position where they have no reason to fear criticism, retribution, or prosecution. They may be a part of a coalition against the empire or a competitor. A coalition of nations set against an empire can overtly injure it without consequence. It is in the best interest of the empire to cease its war with the guerrilla. In this scenario, because they are not only fighting a group of rebels, they are also at war with a legion of equally matched competitors. A coalition of nations has the power to injure an empire politically. They may publicly support the guerrilla with arms because they know the empire cannot strike them. When nations of the world meet to vote on treaties and sanctions, the voices of two states are more persuasive than the clamor of one. If an empire feels being diplomatically isolated, it is unable to seek revenge against the League of Nations formed against it. A competitor that craves battle with the guerrilla's enemy may openly supply them with weapons to provoke a response. Supporting an empire's adversaries with artillery is disrespectful. Yet, it technically does not equate to an actual attack on the empire. If an empire attacks another empire's territory for its dealings in a foreign country, the party that shot the first round is seen as the aggressor. Every nation on the planet is in agreement that a sovereignty has the right to defend itself. An empire's act of aggression against a competitor can leave it isolated on the battlefield and during treaty negotiations. Publicly arming guerrillas can be a pretense to establish an occupation. By forming a friendship with the fighters, the empire's enemy creates an excuse to do business in the country. They may agree to grant weapons in exchange for safe passage and a residence of their citizens in the region. A pact of this nature presents problems for the people when the enemy is forced out by the cause. Competition for land, jobs, and property can result in conflicts between aliens and nationals. When violence erupts, the empire sends in troops to mediate. The residence of foreign forces in the land of the guerrilla is the definition of an occupation. By constructing safe routes into the country, a false ally is able to avoid the invasion process, while the guerrilla expands their resources, fighting off its competitor. It places its forces in a position to capture the country with twice the amount of resources needed for a successful occupation. The movement does not fight off one empire to allow the presence of another. An organization may openly provide weapons or the ability to purchase weapons because they sympathize with the cause. Groups that agree with the guerrilla on issues regarding religion, politics, and society are not afraid to show their support for the movement. These groups may provide aid at the risk of being prosecuted, or they may be shielded by the laws of their government. Organizations that believe in the movement are just as fearless in their convictions as the guerrilla is in their fight against the empire. The enemy is a great source of arms. Weapons are gained from the empire via its bases, convoys, and fallen pawns. Spies are used to smuggle weapons out of enemy bases. Convoys transporting weapons are ambushed and robbed of artillery. Slaughtered pawns are unable to grip firearms. Weapon caches are relocated frequently and hidden within the crowd or the environment. Chapter 8. Ideology. All wars are fought over matters of principle. The empire believes that it can take what it wants because it has the power to do so. Its adversaries are seen as nothing more than obstacles. Killing innocents is merely the cost of doing business. When at war, the empire is heartless and spreads this feeling throughout its ranks. Any official or pawn that sympathizes with the enemy's cause is considered a traitor. A man cannot reason with a machine. The empire does not have the capacity to value the lives of foreigners. It barely values the lives of its own citizens. The empire lives to conquer and conquers to live. The movement is as unreasonable as their enemy. Though it is possible for the empire to overwhelm the guerrilla in battle, defeating their ideology cannot be done. Though a guerrilla may fight for a variety of reasons, the cause is always tied to an unshakable ideology. One must have a strong mind to outmaneuver an opponent when on the inconvenient end of a mismatch. Firm belief in an ideology forces a man to move forward when his mind is tempted to go astray. The philosophy of a fighting force can turn the cowardly into vicious wolves and the frail into conniving bastards. Religion can be used to guide men toward the enemy. Every faith believes that its way is right and the way of the outsider is wrong. If two men, strong in their religious convictions, were placed in a room with liquor and a pistol, only one man would exit alive. It is rare that a person can be reasoned away from their religious faith. It is a belief that has been instilled in them since birth. Even when contradictions, errors, or manipulations in sacred texts can be proven, a firm believer cannot allow their mind to disagree with their heart. A religious creed sends the heart on a mission to satisfy the mind. When a person believes that a deity has predetermined their fate, they utilize the maximal potential of their ingenuity and mercilessness. If the enemy is unholy, the devout believe they have no right to be treated with the grace bestowed upon men by their divine master. In the eyes of the blessed, the foe is lower than rat carcasses. When a person fights in the name of a deity, surrendering to the enemy will symbolize denouncement of their faith. They do not allow foes to question the validity of their religious claims. Many religions share the common belief that a deity would not allow his people to fall into the hands of the enemy. Therefore, when a spiritually motivated person is surrounded by the enemy, they prefer to die in the process of executing an opponent. They are willing to sacrifice their life to take the enemy's life to show that they have more faith in their deity than the enemy has in theirs. Though faith does not prove a religion to be correct, it does make the enemy uneasy. An empire cannot win a religious war against a guerrilla. A man cannot submit when his faith is tested, especially when the odds of success are not in his favor. The empire's victories are never seen as gifts from heaven. They are viewed as a result of overpowering a weak opponent. No matter how it tries to tie its flag to a deity, empires are treated as practical entities. The only way an empire could win a battle of holy convictions would be if it ended an invasion or occupation on religious grounds. To use religion effectively, the guerrilla promotes the belief that they are in a situation that only a supernatural being can get them out of. Every victory is said to be the result of their deity's blessings. Every defeat is the product of the enemy's trickery, deceitfulness, and ungodliness. Unless a man with supernatural powers descends from the skies and fully explains the creation of the universe and the purpose of mankind on Earth, a war fought on religious grounds does not offer many exit strategies. There will never be peace between the two sides unless the invader decides to leave. The guerrilla does not seek peace, they seek victory. Wars based on appearances create undying conflicts. Empires are well known for waging wars seemingly based on the race or ethnicity of its adversaries. Throughout history, empires have masked their desire to confiscate the territory and possession of others under claims of genetic superiority. When its citizens are in poverty, they seek riches by any means. When an empire provides the opportunity for them to feed their families through robbing and raping the lands of others, pawns will latch on to any excuse given. By using bigotry to motivate its troops, the empire sends them on a seek and destroy mission that can only be satisfied with the capture or death of every member of the inferior race. The enemy cannot hide. They wear their uniform in the nude. An ideology rooted in racial superiority cannot be used by the guerrilla. It is an evil notion in the eyes of many human beings across the planet. Though the guerrilla commits evil deeds to further their cause, only the empire must be seen as the devil. A theme of racial defense is the only racial philosophy available. Facing extinction at the hands of the empire, purely because of the way they were born, compels all fighters to remain loyal to the cause. Being subjugated due to a characteristic out of one's control ignites a hatred that surpasses that of a tormentor. Every opportunity to make a bigot suffer is seized. Strong alliances and support can be garnered under the oppression of a racist regime. Competitors enjoy instances where they can occupy the moral high ground. They openly provide weapons and supplies to support its defeat. Nations that fear being subjugated through the same means also support the cause. Once the empire makes it clear that its actions are driven by racial hatred, it cannot be forgiven by the world. Even if it attempts to use different motives to offer apologies in the future, nations will always be suspicious of its virtues. No citizen or guerrilla will be satisfied with the self-proclaimed genetically superior regime dwelling within their borders. A guerrilla cannot betray or surrender their skin. A conflict of this nature only ends with the departure of the enemy or the extermination of the guerrilla. Fighting behind political lines creates everlasting discord. When the empire style of government directly conflicts with the people's way of life, political ideology can be used to stimulate the movement. Political beliefs reflect the ideals of an individual. There is no middle ground. Either a person is for the cause or against it. When a group of people gather around a political party that supports their inherent ideas about life, it strengthens their belief that their way of thinking is correct. No one with a different view is allowed to bring doubt into their circle. An empire will not change its government structure to appease even its own people. The guerrilla is just as stubborn in war. When political beliefs coincide with social values, the people can be convinced that in losing against the empire, they lose the right to preserve their culture. Many civilians surrender to the enemy when the changes imposed on their lives are simply administrative. New governments that impact the way they live and interact with each other compel citizens to become trusted allies of the guerrilla. An empire that is malicious in political restructuring associates its government with acts of brutality. Such a correlation is not easily disconnected. Aligning the cause with a political ideology can attract mighty allies. Empires with opposing styles of government deeply hate each other. They continually search for ways to undermine one another. A superior or equally matched competitor will not be attacked by the empire. In forming an alliance with the guerrilla, the empire's foe is obligated to be fair and provide its full support in order to disgrace its opponent. Choosing the correct political identity can result in gaining better weapons, supplies, and technology. The guerrilla can always depend on a political ally for support. Revenge is a desire that can fan the flames of a conflict for generations. It takes one of great humility or fear to avoid seeking retribution after a trespass is committed against them. In war, the modest are shot in the face and the fearful are stabbed in the back. Promoting an ideology deep-seated in vengeance is in the best interest of the guerrilla. People who feel wronged or slighted will go to the ends of the earth to save face. When the Empire provides good reason to seek revenge, the need for prep talk is minimal. Dreams of placing the Emperor's head on a stake will be the only way a guerrilla can sleep soundly. Every fallen comrade and civilian can be used to fuel the movement. Revenge is a useful tool in warfare because satisfaction can never be granted to the seeker. Even if the Empire is defeated, it remains the enemy. It is never allowed to make amends for its wrongdoings. The Empire itself does not overlook an offense. If the life of one pawn is taken in battle, it attempts to take 100 lives to save face. Using the eye for an eye principle as the basis for action creates fighters that cannot be pacified. The desire for revenge burns in wounded hearts until the enemy vanishes. As unwelcome guests in a country, the Empire is at the mercy of its host. It seeks comfort in the midst of assassins. A region cannot be occupied for long if the people are united in their desire for vengeance. The death of one generation does not bring peace. Contempt for the enemy is passed down to the children and grandchildren of the people. The goal is to keep fighters and citizens engaged in battle against the Empire for as long as possible. An unassailable ideology prolongs a conflict. Chapter 9. Nonviolent Strikes. There are situations where arms are useless against the enemy. A minimally armed population facing the Empire is like a rabbit between the teeth of a fox. Any attempt to struggle causes more pain. However, unlike animals, man has a voice that can travel across the globe. A region may lack proper defense tools due to underdeveloped technology or complacency brought on by long periods of peace. A predator cannot resist the chance to test the resolve of the defenseless, even if an endangered nation has seen battle against its equals. If it severely lacks technology and manpower, there is no way it can compete against the Empire. To level the playing field, the eyes of the world can be used as a weapon. Non-violent means can be used to manipulate the appearance of an empire. News travels fast in the modern world. The media can be exploited because it is motivated by self-interest. News groups compete against each other on a daily basis. The first organization or journalist to report a story is the victor. The spoils come in the form of riches or prestige. Being allowed access, where other media outlets are banned, motivates a news organization to nationally televise an incident. By granting certain groups access to the cause, the guerrilla is welcomed into the homes of possible supporters. When the planet is watching and the Empire claims to be an ethical entity, its emissions of hypocrisy attracts external critics and enemies. The world craves a chance to prove its moral supremacy. Even the crook seizes the opportunity when given an honest chance to become praiseworthy. Using peaceful means to strike the enemy is not done to gain sympathy. It is done to spark empathy. To sympathize is to callously analyze the situation from afar. To empathize is to contemplate the consistency of one's values if forced by circumstances to walk in the shoes of another. It is easy to feel sorry for someone and move on in life. Mentally trading places with an individual relentlessly nags the subconscious mind. It is this feeling that drives one to rise to action in defense of others. Humans, as ignorant as they pretend to be, are reasonable creatures by nature. If empathy is a weakness, it is one that can be exploited to gain victory. The majority of Earth does not view the oppression of others as a respectable feat. Even the citizens of a ruthless empire fear that the machine may one day turn against them. In war, the untouchable side is expected to act with humility. With clear evidence that its forces could decimate its opponent within weeks, observers expect empires to allow weaker enemies to surrender. Everyone likes to envision themselves the victor, if ever forced to combat a powerful foe. However, People also prefer to feel secure in the notion that, if forced to submit, they would retain their dignity as human beings. The world does not view the relinquishment of arms as an act that waives basic human rights. The absence of weapons in battle against the oppressor bestows the moral high ground to the unarmed. While judgment and harsh words directed at the empire garner attention, the ultimate goal of a nonviolent strike is to create meaningful alliances. Assistance is sought out in the form of strategic, diplomatic, or military intervention. Through the threat of military force and economic isolation, the empire can be forced by its competitors to make peace. A strategic ally floods the region with protesters and eyewitnesses. They increase the size of the crowd by injecting it with its own citizens and other foreign supporters. They make it seem like the world is rallying against the empire. Masses of peaceful demonstrators exhaust the empire's resources and can lead to the ejection of its forces. An ally provides military intervention when the empire refuses to relent its assault on unarmed civilians after various requests and threats. The movement may form alliances, but they do not need friends. The presence of military forces is never considered an ideal situation. The potential for conflict outweighs any possible benefits of an alliance. The support of an empire's enemy can be motivated by selfish aims. A competitor may aid the cause in their apparent helpless state to gain a moral victory over the empire. It may also be in pursuit of the same objective as the empire. However, its strategy regarding attainment of the prize is through the use of cooperation rather than force. Cooperating to create a quid pro quo scenario is a competitor's method of executing nonviolent strikes. A competitor can steal victory while keeping its hands clean by supporting a peaceful movement and then obligating the cause to provide repayment for its services. A successful nonviolent strike disrupts the function of the city and occupies the attention of enemy units. Without sufficient numbers, the revolution will not be televised. A sea of minds united in support of basic human rights is more appealing to the eye than a group of 10 poorly dressed dissidents with signs. If only a small group of protesters is available, the enemy is provoked to cause a national incident. Throughout history, many rebellions have erupted over the loss of less than 2 lives. If willing to die for the cause, a small group can make a great impact. Their sacrifice not only gains the world's attention, it also motivates others to join the movement. Every nonviolent strike perpetuated symbolizes the movement's demand for freedom. The desperation in their acts and faces show that they have ran out of all options. Their refusal to trade blows with the empire places them in a predicament where desperation cannot be faked. If a movement is honest, it cannot be ignored. Regardless of the size of the movement, one act of brutality committed by the empire does not inspire outsiders to intervene. A few cases of excessive force or international treaty violations are expected in every invasion or occupation. If it is perceived that an entire empire is corrupt, it can be forced to terminate its military incursion. The withdrawal of the enemy can be gradual or immediate, depending on the politics involved. Whatever the case may be, nonviolent strikes can lead to the thorough elimination of the enemy. Protests, marches, standoffs, sit-ins, and freedom rides can be used to strike the enemy without using violence. A successful protest is organized by selecting a meaningful location. Places where the empire's representatives conduct meetings or where other official business is done are primary targets. Locations with a symbolic significance either to the empire or the cause are also suitable spots for protests. The purpose of a protest is to aggravate the enemy and create confusion. Participants are encouraged to shout and chant furiously in the faces of the empire's enforcers. The empire's refined bureaucrats may be able to resist provocation, but its pawns lack the sophistication necessary to show temperance. Chaos does not go unnoticed by news correspondents. Marches are used to occupy the empire's forces and draw them out. A multitude of dissenters traveling through the area threatens the Empire's dominance. Marches place the Empire in a dilemma where all options expose it to danger. If it allows enemies to freely congregate, it is showing weakness and possibly inviting defeat by allowing its foes to plot in unity. If it dispatches forces to monitor or engage them, resources are wasted or siphoned from areas vulnerable to armed attacks. Marches are also used as a recruiting tool. A united front made up of thousands advancing on communities devastated by the Empire's cloud of dread inspire hope in civilians. People are ordinarily afraid of being the first to take a stand against tyranny. However, they rarely have reservations about taking a place behind the shield of countless allies. Standoffs are nonviolent strikes executed in areas of high traffic or congestion. Demonstrators occupy these locations and refuse to move. This tactic is used to garner attention as well as disrupt the enemy's lines of communication and supply routes. Sit-ins involve occupying buildings. However, enclosed spaces are more dangerous to hold due to low visibility and the ability of pawns to control entrances and exits. Structures are only occupied when eyewitnesses and media are allowed to view the confrontations with the enemy. Transporting demonstrators from region to region can make the movement appear widespread. An uprising by one clan can be manipulated to portray unrest across the entire nation. When the guerrilla uses nonviolent strikes, they are prepared to die for the cause. Threats to a successful nonviolent campaign are attacks against the enemy by splinter groups and false flags perpetrated by the Empire. There are bound to be members of the cause that see nonviolent strikes as cowardly and dishonorable. Nonviolent groups publicly differentiate themselves from those who use force, while coordinating their peaceful engagements with the violent campaigns. The guerrilla does not have the resources available to allow manpower to go to waste. Disowning the action of splinter groups does not mean they are not beneficial. False flags are used by the enemy to control the identity of the guerrilla. The Empire can destroy the movement's potential to form beneficial alliances by committing horrific acts against its own citizens and attributing responsibility to the cause. No nation wants to openly associate itself with terrorists. They represent a threat to every form of government in the world. No matter what their cause is, terrorists are deemed anarchists in the eyes of leaders and monsters in the minds of citizens. Civilians despise terrorists because they represent a direct threat to their well-being. An enemy that takes away a nation's sons and daughters on the battlefield is considered more honorable than a terrorist group that brings the battle to its front door. While implementing nonviolent or violent strikes, the guerrilla avoids being labeled a terrorist. They strive to be depicted as freedom fighters. They claim to commit acts in the name of freedom, against the tide of oppression, and to save lives. Since the actions of splinter cells and the Empire cannot be directly controlled, the peaceful guerrilla ensures that the reports of nonviolent strikes and brutalities carried out by the enemy outnumber reports that discredit the cause. To gain universal support, the guerrilla makes the world believe they do not deserve the wrath of the Empire. Chapter 10. The Police State. A police state exists when the rights of the people are extremely limited or non-existent. The people are not allowed to think, move, or breathe without the government's consent. Uniformed protectors become more feared than thieves and muggers. The law becomes the enemy on all levels. Citizens are abused by the enforcers of the law, manipulated by the teachers of the law, and robbed by the creators of the law. The streets belong to the pawns. Knowledge is hoarded for the rich, and old age is misery for the underclass. A police state is a cold-blooded machine. It enslaves its lovers, imprisons its dissidents, and makes its enemies dependent upon its continuation. Children born within this environment are programmed to be as lifeless as the government. They are taught that free thought is synonymous with disobedience. To question the establishment is to ask for criticism and punishment. Obstacles are built for the innovative mind. In this atmosphere, Isolation seems more desirable than life on the outside. Citizens locked in cages are permitted more freedom than residents of homes. The police state cannot exist without the citizen. It makes the citizen believe otherwise. It leaves no man to independence. It holds only two fates for the people: slavery and death. The people are forced to choose liberty or captivity, the former at risk of execution. The agenda of the totalitarian state is reflective of its controller. Peace is a subjective concept. Citizens are convinced into accepting the system's view of tranquility. New power that transforms a government into a police state bathes in the blood of the naive. The philosophy of the protester is delivered to the people by the tainted hands of the powerful. A police state despises voices of truth. It prefers allies and enemies that match its enthusiasm in tormenting the weak. A violent police state creates a kingdom within a nation. Those in control make themselves royalty and assign the role of the peasantry to the people. It is not enough for the royals to keep the peasants in poverty. They use them to increase their wealth. Wealth comes in many forms. Greed comes in one. A kingdom's desire is always excessive. If it were reasonable in its appetite, there would be no need for a police state. When there is absolutely no threat to its power, the kingdom uses force to enslave the people. Pawns are used on the national and local levels to serve as its eyes, ears, and arms. The people do not labor to live. They labor to survive. The safest journey is traveling to and from work. The duty of the pawn is to protect the kingdom's treasure chest. Though the value of a citizen is determined by their economic contributions, royals see no peasants as irreplaceable. Compliance with the system may save the citizen from abuse, but conformity does not equal freedom. All property of a peasant is considered property of the kingdom. Royals view peasants as the best shovels for digging up gold. Death is around every corner in a police state. Every aspect of daily life is influenced by the government. The goal is to create obedient workers that accept crumbs with gracious smiles. The kingdom is not above using manipulation in its pursuit of riches. If it cannot force the people into slavery, it makes them believe that shackles are stylish. The government is simply a tool used to enrich the kingdom and keep the people away from castles, areas populated by royals. Royals keep the people in poverty to avoid threats to their rule. If the people were allowed to retain their true earnings, they could unite and seize control of the government. Laws are used to implement economic policies that keep the peasantry with their hands out and chasing a reality that exists only for royals. Poverty is also promoted by encouraging the masses to revel in ignorance. A person of intelligence can read signs of danger. An illiterate mind is easily misled. The kingdom functions well with self-loathing subjects. People who hate themselves accept what is given to them, even when it is worthless. A citizen repulsed by their own image is liable to seek acceptance from the royals or destroy themselves. When it is necessary to decrease the population of peasants without force, the kingdom plays on the people's self-hatred to get them to commit genocide. The kingdom ignites internal wars between peasants by elevating one group above another. The elevated group is given small fortunes or privileges. This inspires imprudence on one side and contempt on the other. Conflict is inevitable when these groups are forced to coexist outside of castles. Instead of fighting to overthrow the monarchy, peasants become obsessed with scraps. They fight over a slither of the riches being stolen from them by the state. When the people hate themselves, they put more value in material things than in the lives of their neighbors. In a police state, one diamond can prompt a war within a community. When the people fight amongst themselves, no excuse is needed for the existence of the police state. It can claim to promote peace while encouraging violence behind the scenes. The royals make one peasant feel superior to the other peasant to gain one completely loyal peasant. When scarcity makes a mother kill her daughter to spare her from a life of poverty, the police state is in working order. The recruiting of peasants as pawns adds to the division of the people. Brutalization at the hands of their fellow citizens hides the involvement of the royals. Peasants are encouraged to feel accepted into upper society when appointed as enforcers of the kingdom's laws. Privileged peasants and pawns obtain leniency for offenses against the rest of the population, as long as their crimes do not interfere with the state's profits. Citizens can be fooled, but the royals see a clear difference between themselves and the slave. A police state is not complete without a profitable prison system. Imprisonment is used to make an example of the kingdom's enemies and increase its revenues. The police state takes great liberty in defining what acts and individuals are considered criminal. Dealings that may bring the peasantry great profits are heavily regulated. Behaviors that pose a threat to the kingdom are outlawed. The poverty imposed on the people make them desolate. For many, desperation ultimately leads to crime. Prisons are used to remove individuals from society that are not willing to humble themselves and accept bondage. Citizens are deceived into paying for more protection than necessary. The kingdom imposes conditions and laws that instigate illegal activity on one segment of the population and gets the other segment to overpay for the prosecution and imprisonment of criminals. The police state makes incarceration look more luxurious to the poor than living outside of jail cells. While law-abiding citizens starve and die in poverty, inmates are provided daily meals and health care. The peasants not only fund the construction of prisons, the salary of its maintainers, and the living expenses of criminals, they also pay the wages of their street-level oppressors. Pawns are obligated to keep citizens safe from crimes perpetrated by other peasants. They also have a duty to keep the poor away from castles. Segregation is accomplished by force and through implementing devastating economic policies. Peasants are subjected to stop and frisk procedures, random searches, and harassment to drive them away from castles. Pawns are not above planting evidence to incriminate the innocent. Royal lands are also kept a great distance from the peasantry due to their cost. Areas designed for the masses are affordable. Regions for the royals are not. The average income of a citizen is kept low enough to prevent them from buying their way into a castle. Peasants are paid just the right amount to keep them enslaved. In the face of poverty, prison, and death, the average citizen bows to survive. A nonviolent police state uses a pyramid system to control society. The tyrannical force behind a nonviolent police state is not as influential in the spotlight as it is behind the scenes. The use of extreme violence will lead to its exposure. Some regimes are more powerful hidden than out in the open. The nonviolent police state values its diplomatic relations and its power to intervene in the affairs of others. To gain support during foreign expeditions, a state's oppressive tactics cannot be obvious. Control of the people is acquired through psychological manipulation and maintained through secrecy. The pyramid system divides the populace by class. The elite are granted access to wealth and opportunities unobtainable by the rest of society. Once position at the top of the structure is achieved, the upper class pass down the reins to their descendants. The pinnacle of the pyramid owns the law. The power to create, enforce, and subvert laws inhabits the scepter of the elite. Citizens fear the violent police state. One that uses non-violent tactics is provocative and inspires great hatred and resentment. The state stirs up these emotions because the people can provide no proof of its dishonesty. Yet, they are sure it is deceptive. The powerful get away with murder and smile in the face of the financially deficient. Because it limits its show of force, rebellious citizens who use violence against the state are labeled terrorists, a threat not only to the government, but to all citizens. Most of the underclass attribute their impoverished conditions to fate. When many are ignorant of their actions behind the scenes, the elite can uphold the pyramid system for ages. Like the royals, the goal of the elite is to secure full control of the people's economic destiny. They aim to defy gravity and create a trickle-up phenomenon. The elite own much of the resources related to survival. The people must buy their time on Earth. Every transaction initiated by the citizenry enriches the powerful. By owning the resources, lands, and businesses that fuel commerce, the powerful control the government and impose their will on the people. The elite take a percentage of every income to preserve their wealth. They only spend money to make money. Their heavy influence over the government impacts its economic policies. Laws are forced upon the people to keep them in poverty. Loopholes are created for the upper class. Debt is used to encourage economic dependence. The elite use the system to prevent people from having a surplus of resources. A lifetime of financial obligation ensures transfer of the substructure's excess property to the portfolio of the rich. Like the royals, the elite benefit from publicly funded prisons. The powerful also benefit from the implementation of public programs. The goal is to remove excess resources from the middle section of the pyramid and give it to the lower class. Its support of public programs makes the elite-controlled government seem socially responsible and charitable. The ruse does more to stifle economic progression of the middle class than assist the poor. Though public aid may provide occasional relief to some, the intention of the elite is to keep the poor dependent upon subsidies for survival. Within a pyramid-structured society, proper education sums up the difference between a life of poverty and a life of comfort and riches. Income is specified by occupation. Employment options are determined by educational background. The discussion of education is separate from that of intelligence. Careers within the system focus more on certificates gained through vocational training than mental capabilities. Though a person may be intelligent enough to do a job successfully, their indigence will prohibit entrance into formal training programs. By controlling the cost of proper education, the elite decides the fortune of many citizens. A legion of uneducated laborers at the bottom of the system creates employees and consumers for those at the top. To occupy the middle of the pyramid, a citizen must complete extensive training. The elite aim to subjugate the people at birth. They want those born in poverty to die in poverty to maintain the order of the system. When a person is born to a poor and uneducated family, stages of their early development may not be as mentally stimulating as necessary. In childhood, the individual may be forced to attend educational institutions reflective of their family's income. By the time they reach their teens, participation in the worthless school system seems unprofitable and not a thought is given to higher education. The decision to not pursue a college degree keeps the individual at the bottom of the pyramid. The cycle begins anew when they start their own family. When the people are economically dependent on the elite, it is impossible to remove them from the apex. The powerful are skilled in making the people believe that they are being supplied with sufficient education. Trusting anything given by the elite is foolish. What may seem like proper education is simply another control mechanism, a tool used to mold people into impressionable objects. They allow the people to be taught only in things they want them knowledgeable. Any man can be trained to be a slave. Encouraging wisdom and self-expression is not on the agenda of the elite. To gain further protection from detection, the dominant class allows the people to impose disadvantageous conditions upon themselves. When the state allows the people to cast votes to determine their living conditions, the elite rig the game by offering choices that are all beneficial to their game. No matter what the people choose, the police state's agenda proceeds. The only individuals allowed to hold leadership positions are those who pledge their allegiance to the elite. Even when officials are clearly corrupt, no government action is taken to remove them. The people may be allowed to voice their opinion. However, little action is taken to move the nation in the direction desired by its citizenry. The elite make it difficult for citizens to form political parties. The political arena's entrance fee forces the people to choose between 2 or 3 devils. Only the wealthy have the means to campaign. Since the elite have isolated the country's economic resources, only the elite are truly capable of running for office and hand-picking candidates. The people are studied closely by the state before candidates are presented. The objective of every election is to appeal to the vanity of the people. Dividing the people is also the purpose of campaigns. The masses are forced to choose between night and day. Meeting in the middle is an option that is vilified. At the end of every election, the only change that occurs is a widening of the gap between the people. The people are made to believe that the only way they can be free is by limiting the rights of fellow citizens. The elite can put the nation at war against itself at any time and reap great profits from the situation. The enemy of the people takes comfort in anonymity. The elite are skilled in using religious ideology to encourage infighting. The unification of faith with political agendas transforms constituents into loyal subjects. Another trick in the arsenal of the elite is their ability to conceive to the poor that the middle-class citizens are the elite. The pyramid system has many obscure subdivisions within its substructure. Those considered prosperous by the standards of an average citizen have no understanding of the wealth under the control of the elite. The citizens of a divided nation do not vote for their policies to better their lives. They vote to strike their enemies. Forcing the people to choose between good and evil keeps the devil on the throne. Citizens of a police state inevitably seek an enemy to blame for their living conditions. The elite are proud to submit their demands regarding this matter. Scapegoats are bred by imposing conditions on one section of the populace. Prompting poverty in one community causes that community to steal from its neighbor to survive. Distrust breeds contempt and apathy. When one part of the country does not care about the survival of its counterpart, it is half dead. A lively nation is a threat to the grip of the elite. Poverty and ignorance are the main contributors to criminal activity. Surrounding one part of the nation with these factors creates a nemesis for the other segment to combat. Scapegoats are used to fuel the police state. The people are forced to pay the government to protect them from their fellow citizens. Though the threat is real, the reason for the threat has the most to gain from its continuation. Another way scapegoats are produced is through the creation of idols. When the people are hopeless, they seek inspiration. The police state provides individuals to guide the flock. Idols are used to control the behavior of citizens. Idols are entertainers and societal icons. Their ability to influence people is manipulated by the elite. They are used to infect the people with opinions and directives that would not occur if not for their influence. If the elite desire the high occurrence of criminal behavior in one segment of the population, they use idols that appeal to that group to promote illegal activities. The question is not the intelligence of the people being deceived, but the hopelessness instilled in their hearts. The downcast are more susceptible to being misled. An idol encourages the people to hold their head up high. When a person is accepted as a savior, their actions are not only acceptable, but liable to be copied by worshippers. To the guerrilla, a police state is an enemy in their backyard. When dealing with a violent police state, their goal is to cause the kingdom to implode. A violent police state has no respect for its citizens. The guerrilla reminds the state that it cannot function without the cooperation of the people. Nonviolent strikes are used to command the recognition of the people's rights. However, they are useless if intervention is not a possibility. When the citizens cannot depend on the world for support, the guerrilla wages war against the pawns and government officials. A totalitarian regime is harsh in its approach because it feels safe. Their close relationship makes royals and pawns feel safe from the people's fury. The guerrilla forms a chasm between the two sides by making them fear for their individual lives. They cause the royals to mistrust their own strategies and pawns to mistrust the royals. Their homes and vehicles are placed in constant danger. The enemy cannot sleep or travel without trepidation. It is the pawn's duty to protect the royals and their interests. Targets they must defend are threatened to lure them into traps. The homes of pawns are more vulnerable than castles. The royals have the benefit of security personnel and fortifications. Pawns are limited to accommodations amongst the people they police. Pawns are also more vulnerable to strikes due to the regularity of their patrol routes. When they spread fear and anxiety throughout the kingdom, the movement compels the royals to choose between oppressing the people and reducing profits. Though the former eventually leads to the latter, immediately ending the use of violence against the people is less damaging to the treasury. Royals are not removed when necessary. If the kingdom surrenders to the will of the people and respects their human rights, they may be allowed to remain in power. When the police state is too proud to respect its citizens, the guerrilla forces it to negotiate. Making the enemy reach a deal allows the people to gain more than fair treatment. The kingdom only agrees to parley when it truly fears the destructive capability of the movement. This fear is imposed by creating a threat that is completely unstoppable and devastating to the nation's infrastructure. The guerrilla puts the kingdom in peril by grounding their cause in martyrdom. When fighters are not afraid to die, their enemy is limited in its threats while they have an array of options at their disposal. Threats from potential martyrs are taken very seriously by the police state. It cannot afford to be caught off guard or seem to be caught off guard while the people are watching. A threat from a man eager to leave Earth is more honest than a king's speech. The enemy is convinced that the world will come to an end if demands are not met. The kingdom loathes giving birth to martyrs. Their influence over the people mutes the voice of the living. The multitude is more willing to follow dead men than reason. Sacrificing one's life for the cause transforms a guerrilla into a martyr. The birth of one martyr creates 1,000 men who want to be similarly revered. When a guerrilla is willing to die to bring down the oppressor, the people believe the entire group is willing to die for them. This belief obligates the population to adopt the same feeling towards the cause. Though the feigning of suicidal tendencies can result in victory, the movement prefers having the option of bringing publicized threats to fruition if their warnings are disregarded. The guerrilla renders the continuation of a police state unviable. The most protected parts of society are avenues that enrich the royals. The income embezzled from citizens is diverted from areas of their concern and used to guard the most profitable communities and firms. These locales are situated within the crosshairs of the guerrilla. The kingdom heavily guards and invests in the things responsible for vastly increasing its wealth. The movement ruthlessly strikes these targets. Successful attacks against the kingdom's interests expose its inability to protect its treasures. Every victory of the cause is a hole in its purse. Commerce itself is made a dangerous activity. The guerrilla violently crusades against industries. Goods are not allowed to move without considering the possibility of an ambush. Citizens are advised to avoid contributing funds to the oppressor. The materialistic live life in the crossfire. Positions within firms are occupied to disrupt economic activities. Organized crime is used to impede and drain the kingdom's wealth. When the state deploys massive forces to meet impending attacks, it allocates resources that can be used to increase its profits. The kingdom is hit the hardest by attacks that never come. The threat of criminal syndicates spoil prospective opportunities for pawns to establish meaningful relationships with citizens. Though violence is the natural trademark of a kingdom, when the crime rate increases, brutality against the people worsens. Underground economies are promoted to steal from the royals. Black markets do not compete. They exemplify strong-arm robberies. Criminal enterprises circumvent tariffs. The guerrilla strikes the lifelines of the kingdom until it is severed from the land. To defeat the rulers of a nonviolent police state, the guerrilla inverts the pyramid. Because the citizens held captive by the elite believe they are free, violence cannot be used to destroy the system. The mind is the only weapon at hand in this war. The pyramid is upturned when the oppressed gain knowledge of their situation. The educated are the only ones who stand a chance in defeating the elite. Knowledge is indeed power in this environment. The guerrilla takes their education seriously and sees the world in its true form. The pursuit of education is similar to acquiring arms. To wallow in ignorance is to surrender. Although the elite place many obstacles in the way of gaining vocational training, knowledge itself is always accessible to those hungry for it. The ability to educate the self and the people is put above gaining approval from the elite's educational institutions. Every university controlled by the elite is considered a financial tool. Knowledge is a weapon that is distributed amongst the people. It is not used selfishly. Wisdom is spread throughout the community. Each citizen that appreciates its value becomes a member of the cause. Living a clean life and proper schooling allows admittance to positions of influence. Guerrillas convince the elite of their loyalty to the system to destroy it from within. Wisdom puts men in positions of power or high enough to influence powerful men. A scholarly people are safe from the hypnosis of the state. The elite conjure up many distractions to place the masses in a position of complete ignorance. When the people do not know the truth, their eyes are closed. They live in dreams manufactured by the elite. The movement awakens the people by encouraging enlightenment. The guerrilla unites the people in the crusade for knowledge, then uses their collective brain power to promote economic unity. The enrichment of communities marked for failure ruins the elite's plot. An independent and self-sufficient people represent lost profits. The guerrilla unites not only the earnings of the people, but also their spending. Citizens are encouraged to limit all proceeds to the elite. Taxation is avoided through the use of underground economics. The shape of the state is altered dramatically. when the have-nots lift themselves up. When the pyramid system is inverted, the elite are driven beneath the earth. When the people can provide for themselves, there is no need for interference from a corrupt government. Because they are all victims of the police state, honorable transactions between citizens are common. It is necessary for the guerrilla to eliminate citizens who attempt to take advantage of the cause. Internal cleansing is done in secret to avoid attention from the state and to maintain the confidence of the people. The movement is for all. No one man is above the movement. The elite does everything within its power to halt the progression of the people. The cause tends to the needs of the people and keeps them focused on the identity of the enemy to limit the proliferation of greed. Sheep can take no other form, but the shepherd can be a great chameleon. It takes much patience and intellect to earn the confidence and contributions of the people. When ready, the people can be stirred up against the elite to create the unity necessary to uplift them. The oppressors remain wealthy when the people are divided. Though they may be comfortable pursuing individual riches, the citizen has two enemies when alone. Rather than allowing them to fight amongst themselves and against the elite, the guerrilla limits the people's enemy to one entity. The people's combined resources can be used to implement political change. A nonviolent police state operates without outward hostility because it is secure in its position. It believes that the people cannot compete with the vast wealth that backs it. When the people gain enough wealth to look the enemy in the eye, it may turn violent. The guerrilla looks forward to the day the elite lose their composure. When dealing with men, many things can be overcome with money. Money is truly the only thing keeping the elite in power. If the government can be bought by one, it can be bought by another. When the people confiscate the throne, corrupt leaders are ousted from their seats. The loss of authority does not necessarily result in the loss of wealth. The elite may still have the required resources to wage war. Chapter 11. Criminal Enterprises. The survival of the cause is placed above the laws of society. Money is viewed as a means of gaining weapons and supplies. The way income is earned is of little significance, so long as the process does not interfere with victory. The guerrilla is not above establishing criminal enterprises to defeat the enemy. When men are corrupt, their laws are invalid. Weapons and supplies need to be obtained quickly and consistently. Fast money facilitates the process. No other activity easily increases finances more rapidly than crime. Illicit trades are given special attention because they deprive the enemy of resources while aiding the cause. The guerrilla is able to capture and make use of what the enemy is unable to grasp. Criminal empires thrive in nonviolent police states. The elite operate by allowing a society to appear free. Criminal operations appear to be legal organizations. The elite put an end to illegal activities within the bounds of the laws they have established, to keep the people spellbound. By legally terminating criminality, the elite increase the people's faith in the system. The guerrilla takes full advantage of the situation by avoiding capture. The time it takes for the elite to pursue them through legal channels provides sufficient opportunities to flee. It is difficult to conceal a major criminal operation because, unlike the guerrilla, it requires moderate stability. Invasions, occupations, and violent police states present levels of lawlessness that provide nearly unprofitable atmospheres. These environments create many opportunities for the enemy to disrupt business. Operation within the nation of an empire's competitor deprives the enemy of the ability to uproot the criminal enterprise. If the empire fears its competition, the guerrilla can channel money into the cause with impunity. A neutral state provides the same protection as a competitor. However, the movement must maneuver with more discretion. The empire is helpless without concrete evidence of their activity. If a trail is left, a neutral state may cooperate for political purposes. A chain of command is used to successfully control a criminal enterprise. The street-level guerrillas execute operations. They are the men and women who get their hands dirty. Street-level guerrillas make up teams. Each team is led by a sergeant. All sergeants are assigned to a lieutenant that oversees operations. Lieutenants are put in charge of multiple sergeants. The sum of one lieutenant and all men under his control are units. Lieutenants answer to captains. The job of a captain is to determine how the goals of the operation are to be accomplished. Each captain leads a battalion that consists of multiple units. Captains report to generals, the individuals who decide what goals to pursue. Generals are loyal to the cause. They only make decisions that benefit the cause. Each general controls a brigade made up of multiple battalions. An odd number of generals are selected by sergeants to determine objectives. The most profitable illicit trades consist of natural resources with universal appeal. Natural resources are accessible. They can be used repeatedly for profit, and the enemy is deprived of their benefits when in the hands of the cause. The drug trade is used to fund the movement. When the environment supports its growth, profits from its narcotics are obtained through its cultivation, processing, importation, exportation, and sale. Cultivation requires the correct environment for growth, while processing is accomplished using accurate machinery or procedure. Fields of operation are heavily guarded. Multiple layers of security forces are used to protect areas of growth and processing. The guerrilla seizes control of the region's vital entry points to import drugs. Using a combination of bribery and strong-arm tactics, they become the nation's gatekeeper. Drug suppliers must grease their palms before conducting business in the area. The movement conducts drug transportation services by extending their control from the border to routes of safe passage throughout the country. Routes are sprinkled with guerrilla fighters assigned to remove all obstacles. In these environments, enemies must approach in packs or die in pairs. Territorial dominance is also necessary to export drugs. Just as nothing enters the country without approval, nothing is allowed to leave. Supplying the drugs to dealers lowers the chance of capture. When a sizable quantity of narcotics is accessible, money can be earned by supplying large amounts to gangs and other criminal outfits. Being a drug supplier is less risky than making direct sales to users. The individuals dealt with are usually criminals themselves and have been vetted thoroughly within the underworld. Dealing on a street level provides more profits. By using members of the cause to deal drugs, the group retains all earnings. Money is saved by not having to fully pay pushers because they work for the cause and not themselves. The drug trade does not function without war. The potential for fast money attracts criminals from all walks of life. The guerrilla has little time or resources to fight on multiple fronts. Drug rivals are killed until there is no competition. When taking over another group's territory, the guerrilla eliminates their leaders first. These murders are carried out in the most gruesome manner possible to send fear through the enemy's ranks. Most low-level members of gangs and crime organizations imitate the bravado displayed by their leadership. Once the brave are shown to be but mere men, susceptible to horrifying deaths, the kids get the message. The government is at times pressured to eliminate the drug trade. The guerrilla lives and breathes in the shadows to stay off their radar. When necessary, scapegoats are offered to appease the masses and move the state's attention to other matters. When members of the government are complicit in the drug trade, pawns are used to eliminate evidence and enemies. Informers are considered a disease within the drug trade. They are cut off when symptoms of their existence are present. Engaging in witch hunts to root out snitches causes the drug operation to rapidly deteriorate from within. There are markets for diamonds, gold, and oil in every part of the world. These natural resources can eventually be exhausted. However, their disappearance is accompanied by high profits. The appeal of high-priced resources provides many outlets for laundering. The greed associated with these products can earn both powerful and discreet business partners. It is rare that the illegal trade of these goods occurs without involvement of a government official. Involving a member of the government in these dealings provides much protection. To be exposed as a conspirator in the illegal profiteering of high-priced resources is every bureaucrat's nightmare. Yet, there is always a risk that the official may attempt to seize total control of the operation. For that possibility, an investment by the powerful is attached to the likelihood of political suicide and bodily harm. Families of business partners are also viewed as collateral. Rebel groups pursuing different agendas are a threat to the operation. The guerrilla defends their territory and takes offensive measures to destroy the flow of the enemy. If the government of the land where business is conducted sets its sights on the operation, there is no option available but to flee. The grounds where these operations take place cannot be moved, and a defensive stance in one location is not a possible feat against an empire. When it is convinced that it is better to allow the movement to prosper than to fight them, the government does not interfere. The cause prefers to assign novice members to perform the labor required to profit from high-priced resources. Forcing the people to carry out these tasks does not gain the support required to wage war against an empire. The world's oldest profession provides a timeless source of income that must be procured and marketed without sympathy. Sex can be a product that can be resold for a lifetime. There is no cost to produce or market the product. It is always in the possession of the worker and always on the mind of the purchaser. The business of prostitution deals with an inexhaustible resource. Though one worker may eventually become unsuitable for promotion, there are always more available in every corner of the world. Mastering the recruiting aspect of this illicit trade is necessary to make it a profitable venture. Recruiters make themselves attractive to get a potential worker's attention. Attractiveness is a subjective concept. What is attractive to some is disgusting to others. A target is studied closely to determine the attributes required to lure her into the trade. Providing a false face and engaging in manipulation are the most common strategies used to collect prostitutes. Their desires are dangled between their eyes, and they are directed to chase them using the measures recommended by the manipulator. Mind control is a skill necessary in the repertoire of those assigned to recruit prostitutes. A worker in pursuit of touchable rewards may bring in profits for several months. One on a quest for emotional security supplies income for decades. A prostitution operation is nothing without loyalty. Workers are encouraged to be loyal to the cause, even if they do not know its true objective. A cause is offered that emits an emotional response. The worker must be willing to die to achieve the objective before she sacrifices her body. Loyalty is ensured through initiation. Each prostitute travels the same path through hell to validate her commitment to the cause. Making workers compete against one another limits the odds of mutiny and motivates them to achieve the goals of the movement. The guerrilla prefers to hide their involvement in a prostitution ring. Though there are many dishonorable actions that are taken to gain victory, the use of sex for profit is universally despised. If necessary, the organization conducts business under the flag of another. Transactions are conducted discreetly in the realm of prostitution to protect the customer and the cause. The type of clientele dealt with value their privacy. Business is sought with wealthy professionals and officials. Customers of this nature have more to lose when hiring a prostitute than the average man. Exceptions are made for famous individuals and pawns. Though their wealth may not be as vast as desired, their exposure as contributors to the trade is an event that they will place much effort in avoiding. Business is not done with law enforcement officials unless their corruption is genuine. Sex trafficking is accomplished through developing locations for reception or creating business relationships within areas where the demand for foreign prostitutes is high. The benefit of exporting workers is the receipt of one-time fees. This activity decreases management responsibilities while earning profits from their labor instantly. Honor is a concept that exists in the imagination of the inexperienced. Competition is fought off in a variety of ways. The first and most important manner is through making the cause more attractive than the enemy. Prostitutes are never forced into service. They are seduced. Therefore, the guerrilla makes himself more charming than the next man. Violence is usually unnecessary when engaged in this criminal enterprise. The supply of potential workers is immense. If a prostitute is lost to the competition, another can be found where she was discovered. Aggression is only brought into play as a defense strategy. The worker cannot be made aware of her value. To present arms in her defense lowers her worth. War is only ways to protect territory and to respond to hostility from competitors. Governments do not seriously interfere with the prostitution trade unless it is carried out overtly and without respect for social standards of local inhabitants. When the reason for their exploitation is hidden, Prostitutes are unable to reveal the role of the movement within the trade. The guerrilla does not wage war against the empire for the sake of prostitutes. The production and sale of knockoff goods is an endeavor undertaken for profit and to undercut the enemy's economy. Every resource on the side of the enemy supports his war machine. Though the movement dreams of physically destroying all the opponent's economic resources, they must resort to imitation at times to hinder its markets. The sale of knockoff goods makes unaffordable goods affordable and unobtainable goods obtainable. The people who desire these goods cannot afford them at retail price. By providing cheap substitutes, the guerrilla confiscates a part of the enemy's market. They allow the poor to get the items they desire without having to make hefty sacrifices. Sometimes the sale of certain goods is limited or banned in various locations. The guerrilla does what the enemy cannot by meeting the demands of patrons in these environments. From the exterior, it seems the enemy is not losing much. However, the fact that consumers are receiving imitations of its merchandise at lower prices impacts the overall value of its products. Though the sale of knockoff goods within the border of a distant region may not directly hurt the enemy, conducting transactions within its domain results in immediate losses. Exporting these products to an adversary's province also nets a similar outcome. In this criminal enterprise, the skills of the worker assigned to manufacture products and the machinery employed are of the utmost value. Civilian workers are paid low wages or members of the movement volunteer to produce knockoff goods. It is rare that an outside force attempts to conquer a production facility. Much cooperation is required between managers and laborers. A hostile takeover is bound to frighten employees and bring an end to production. Though conflict from external factions is uncommon in this trade, production facilities are secured with armed fighters. The movement creates financial black holes through executing scams of misrepresentation. Networks of swindlers, proficient in receiving something for nothing, are formed to compound the effects of fraud. The targets of fraud are the young, the elderly, and the greedy. The naivety of the youth make them vulnerable. Their inexperience and optimism puts them at risk. The guerrilla captures their fantasy and makes them pay for the chance to touch it. Their deteriorated faculties disrupt the vision of the old. As they age, they seek an escape from the drudgery and the mundanity that beleaguers their existence. The adventure they seek does not exist. The guerrilla enters their pockets and leads them into darkness. The avaricious seek something for nothing, and so does the guerrilla. The potential to take more by providing a little is an opportunity the greedy cannot ignore. The movement accepts whatever the victim is willing to invest while offering a return that is too good to be true. Scams of misrepresentation also consist of the theft of identities and forgery. With the concealment being an important aspect of guerrilla warfare, the ability to wear the face of another is useful. Suckers can be manipulated into surrendering their private information through the same manner used to alleviate them of their income. Victims of swindles are usually too ashamed to alert the authorities. Arrest can be avoided by skirting the law or making the victim complicit in a crime. Concealment provides protection, regardless of the legality of the operation. A criminal enterprise can be built by committing robberies and ransoming. R&R is usually carried out by those who lack the finesse and sophistication necessary for more complex schemes. Individuals unfamiliar with their surroundings are prime targets of this operation. Tourists are suckers. They are unarmed, ill-informed, and unprepared when facing the dangers that exist abroad. Tourists believe that the people are the same in every part of the world. They do not expect the evil that lingers on the outskirts of their society to have relatives overseas. Though innocence can be attributed to some, pure ethnocentrism motivates others to carelessly voyage to other parts of the earth. They believe that harm will not come to them where they go, because of where they are from. Foreigners are also targeted because they are expected to have a large amount of money. Common sense suggests that a person does not visit a foreign land without a means to support themselves and return home. Robbery victims lose their return fare, shopping money, and emergency funds. The tourist without these resources is considered an entity not worthy of life on this planet. Depending on the homeland of the foreigner, a ransom may be sought for their life. A visitor from an economically stable region is most likely to be taken hostage. A system is set up to receive payments for the freedom of hostages and to hide the identity and location of their captors. When they are held hostage on the soil of a competitor, a victim's government does not respond with force unless it desires war. The government of a neutral state may aid the enemy in pursuing the guerrilla, or its strength may not be enough to avoid a superpower's intrusion. When the enemy deploys troops to save hostages, they are executed to prevent future rescue attempts. The homeland of a hostage must pay for the life of their citizen. All other choices lead to their death. Though R&R is profitable to the cause, it does not inspire admiration. The involvement of innocent lives in a conflict between the wicked is an affair that churns the stomach of even the most hardened warrior. The disgusting is sometimes necessary in guerrilla warfare. Counterfeit money is produced to support the cause and disrupt the economy of the enemy. The technology and skilled labor necessary to conduct this operation is acquired by any means. Government and groups sympathetic to the cause can help develop counterfeit operations, but their assistance is never free. There is no need for alliances when the resources to carry out the venture independently are available. Introducing fake currency into economies of interest allows the movement to steal from the enemy without having physical access to its financial institutions. When done on a mass scale, infiltration occurs and weakens every dollar printed by the opposition. This event makes it harder for the enemy to wage war. Counterfeit money grants access to resources that would be out of reach otherwise. The downside of this criminal enterprise is the traceability of its product. States place more resources on tracking money than protecting people. The protection of a competitor allows false funds to be printed from a position of safety. Allies are only cooperative if they cannot be linked to the activity. They will not hesitate to sacrifice the movement upon being discovered as a participant in the scheme. Production facilities are safe as long as they remain hidden. When counterfeit funds are used in transactions, receivers are made safe from liability to prevent exposure. Alliances are formed to launder imitation currency. Only trustworthy members of the cause are allowed to participate in this illicit trade. Money is the root of all evil. It is too dangerous to permit the involvement of apprentices. Even high-ranking members of the cause may be vulnerable to greed when exposed to the counterfeiting trade. The punishment for corruption is no more than death and no less than dismemberment. Chapter 12. Psychological Warfare. To ensnare a rodent, its favorite meal is placed between jagged teeth. The hunger that drives it leads to its downfall. Its remains are removed to reset the trap or left on display for others to encounter. The skilled hunter lures enemies to gruesome deaths without grimace. A murderer conquers his own fear of the darkness before using it as an accomplice. Men fear the unknown. They do not hesitate to strike their brethren. Yet they meticulously plan assaults against the foreign. The face of a cornered man is the greatest representation of human equality. No one is safe from premeditated traps. Though the mighty have strength as their advantage, they lack the wisdom to perceive its disadvantages. A trap is not arranged to capture the body. Its purpose is to surround the mind. Those skilled at war know where the enemy's footprints will appear before their boots are planted on the ground. A comfortable pursuer relies on luck. A fearful one depends on faith. The cunning bribe fate to do their bidding and attack the enemy in places angels cannot reach. Only the foolish travel deep into lands where their screams cannot escape. Provisions are made to welcome the wise. Swords are sharpened to greet the thoughtless. Those who march without question are the best victims. Though they see the trap, they continue to approach. Living by the sword brings death by the sword. Living by the trap brings forth death in the same manner. Everyone wants to be a hero, yet they all fear the gates of hell. The entrance to a man's nightmare must be guarded by saints to lure him inside. An acceptable ambush acts as a time machine. It causes the enemy to regress to infancy by reducing their communication skills to that of tears and intense crying. Death is inevitable for the immobilized enemy. Every breath from the time of capture to the time of execution is plagued with thoughts of what could have been and what will be left behind. Missions cannot be carried out properly when men fear being snatched up. The daring become too timid to penetrate the land. The wise become too paranoid to lead. The command pushes them all forward from a distance. A trap set to kill presents more certainty than a ruse constructed to capture. Those accustomed to moving on their own accord dread the idea of being controlled by other men. The skilled hunter makes suicide seem more favorable than capture. Bound the hands and feet of a man, and he will struggle to escape. Point a weapon at his head and he will surrender. The preference of a man is clear. The threat of capture casts shadows in territories of sunshine. The kidnapper speaks for the gagged and acts as eyes of the blindfolded. To surrender one's life is honorable. To surrender one's freedom is torture. Men with families are ideal hostages. The courageous serve as cautionary tales. If one man can be abducted, 100 men are at risk of the same fate. If 2 men can be taken, 1,000 others second-guess their steps. The element of surprise is a prerequisite for executing an ambush. Making the enemy believe that the intent of an ambush is to take them alive causes much apprehension. The enemy spends many hours in agony while pondering the odds of their capture. There should be no leisure time during war, but man is stubborn and easily led astray. Moments of relaxation are the most dangerous of all occasions. Cutting a force in half lessens the complications that coincide with stealing the liberty of men. The wise hunter does not waste time pursuing targets he cannot capture. A man is more fearful of abduction than a boy. The mind of the enemy must be able to perceive the dangers that lie ahead. If the enemy does not know the fate of the missing, they will not know where to look and what to fear. The guillotine was used to instill fear in the people. Though it accomplished its goal for centuries, it eventually became a provocative tool. Flogging a man on the street does not break the will of the people. It motivates servants to take up arms and storm the castle. The humiliation of one brother infects the other with shame. The prudent hunter baits the avenger. No weapon on earth can precisely hit the most vulnerable part of men. Actions carried out on others are the only means of striking this area. Whispers of homicides elicit fear. The arrogance of public executions attracts rage. The enemy without poise is partially responsible for their own demise. A man who berates his lover in private is forgiven. One who assaults her in public is unforgiving. To kill a gentleman, a predator places a maiden's honor in jeopardy. The competent hunter ensures that no one can save the savior in his time of need. The mighty are obligated to react to the death of a national when it is publicized. A prisoner of war is abandoned in the darkness of dungeons. A combatant facing the gallows is sought out with much effort. Revealing an enemy's inability to protect its people garners its full attention. If many view the disclosure, it will recklessly hunt for redemption. Ignoring the taunts of an enemy is wise, but the self-righteous are too powerful to yield. The opinions of politicians are deemed more relevant than the plans of generals. The clever warrior sets a trap between the strong and their emasculated pride. When the people are decoys, their hatred is used to lure the enemy. No other behavior infuriates the enemy more than the jubilance of the crowd at the sight of its fallen. A vain leader would rather exterminate his entire force than allow the execution of one of his men before a crowd. He would sacrifice thousands to preserve his status. Without the presence of a crowd, the execution of an enemy is an insignificant act. The final screams of an enemy must be heard around the world for a response to come from the opposition. A forced action is never a wise one, especially when it is expected. The human body is a beautiful spectacle until it is turned into a corpse. There is a chilling feeling that all men experience when in the presence of the dead. This feeling resembles disgust when viewing the corpse of a stranger. It becomes helplessness in the company of a fallen comrade or a loved one. Eventually, this feeling turns into anger when the one responsible for the death is revealed. A skilled warrior inflicts this feeling upon the enemy to lure it into traps. The dismemberment of an enemy intensifies the rage of its compatriots. It signifies the highest level of disrespect that can be imposed upon a human being. When a fighter sees the corpse of a comrade, they imagine themselves in the same position. They become the walking spirit of the fallen. Seeing their possible future in terms of separated limbs makes them eager to battle. Different parts of the body and the method of their removal produce an array of emotional responses. The head is the most recognizable part of the body because it holds the face. The sight of a decapitated head can immediately lead to vomiting, as observers imagine their heads being violently separated from their bodies. The abuse of a loved one's face can place a rival into a state of frenzy. An unrecognizable head infuriates the enemy. It shows a lack of respect for the families of the fallen. The detached arms, legs, and torso of a corpse cause more fury than repugnance. Though these body parts send chills down the spine of any man, they are not as personal as the head. The memory of the fallen is still salvageable when the last look on their face remains a mystery. The removal of internal organs paints a brutal picture. No enemy on earth would contemplate letting such an action go unpunished. It is an evil method indeed, but dismemberment attains the intended results. It takes an enemy of extreme patience and tolerance or fear to not rush into battle after the reception of a comrade's limbs. But, since men are disagreeable and rash by nature, the dismemberment of enemies quickly spawns reinforcements that know not what to expect. Pretending to be weak tempts the enemy to launch a heavy assault. When the capabilities of a man are unknown, he must be drawn out. Once his way of doing things is revealed, he can be ambushed. The fragile always attract the attention of the strong. What is the purpose of strength if it cannot be used to dominate? To entice a foe, the wise fighter creates mysteries that can only be solved through offensive maneuvers. It is considered a waste of ammunition to put holes in a corpse. To capture their prey, the skilled hunter pretends to be dead and invites the enemy's blades to come near. Feigning weakness is a strategy used to set up counterattacks. Once the enemy has drilled through the countryside, a reversal cannot be completed with the same amount of intensity. Though one would expect the full force of the enemy against a weak target, its overconfidence weakens its blows. A man fights fiercely when his life is at risk, and half-heartedly when victory is expected. An enemy in anticipation of victory is like a drunkard who prepares for a boxing match by excessively drinking. They will surely be decimated by the opponent who fears for their life. The proficient hunter prefers setting traps for the self-assured. Facing the calm is better than opposing the frantic. The latter puts more effort in attempts to escape. When forces are equal in strength, all sides are fearful of committing errors. Knowing an opponent's limitations prompts one to advance. Secretly feeding the enemy erroneous information is similar to euthanasia in certain aspects. Controlling one's appearance gains access to the reins of the enemy's forces. Traps hunger for aggressive enemies. Without them, starvation occurs. If patience is a sign of weakness, the expert hunter will await his prey for decades. The wise fighter knows that not everything is as it seems. They convince the enemy of the contrary. The only sure way to evaluate an enemy's strength is to meet them in battle. Weapons are lowered at the sight of white flags and raised hands. 1 second of relaxation provides enough time for the enemy to open fire. Surrender does not have to be a last resort. It can be used to defend and attack. War is a lengthy endeavor. Combatants long for the moment they can set down their arms. The cunning make their enemy believe that victory is near, then fiercely strikes them on all sides. The skilled fighter does not make his enemy surrender. He takes their life into his possession. The land is conquered before the people are taken captive. The best warriors lack compassion. Such an emotion blinds one to the possibility of deception. To kick a man when he's down is frowned upon within society. War is an uncivilized activity. An enemy, renowned for acts of mercy, can be victimized by the hands of a kneeling opponent. An enemy well known for its brutality can be massacred by a fleeing adversary. How one is lured into traps depend on their temperament. The end of a war is a subjective event. As long as the mind of the opposition remains intact, the supposed victor claims a meaningless prize. A man can halt pursuit of his dreams briefly only to rekindle his ambition decades later. Such a decision is his to control until he is no more. The gifted warrior makes even the most paranoid believe that they have relinquished their desire to fight. Being ambushed by a surrendering force is a humiliating outcome. Those who pretend to submit must be prepared to die in the event the enemy is not so foolish. The ruthless aim for the back of their opponent's head. Eye contact reveals motives and expectations. The intentions of the blind are inconceivable. When the eyes are not visible, a man appears to be distracted. The apparent focus of attention elsewhere can be used as a ploy to ensnare the enemy. The unwillingness to strike a foe vanishes when his back is turned. The eager take little time to contemplate all outcomes when such an easy target is available. Blind men are easy targets for thieves. The naive are uncomplicated victims for con men. A brilliant warrior appears to divert his attention from the enemy, to lure them into a position of his choosing. Men who take things at face value never predict some men have eyes behind their heads. Such a mutation is beyond their comprehension. To catch a thief, an experienced watchman allows him to enter the premises but does not allow him to leave. If the eyes of a man are a window to his soul, the merciless avert their glances to capture the enemy. One prepared for the enemy can turn his back against them to invite an attack. An astute strategist arms his shadow. One's peripheral vision must be keen to fend off the enemy and make them pay for their insolence. Only the swift can feign blindness. Adversaries approach with extreme violence when they believe a foe is not attentive. A decoy placed in the scope of an opponent can serve as false eyes. However, such an enticement must be expendable. Ignorance can be bliss. The use of unawareness to attract the enemy is a tactic that must not be overindulged. Like many things in life, negligence can be artificial. When the goal is to push back the enemy, its fears and weaknesses are exploited, and the brave fear the invincible. It is paramount to be acquainted with the rival's phobia. If it widens the eyes and hastens the heart, it is the perfect repellent. Great warriors know how to set traps to capture and dissuade. The decision to proceed means death to those who love life and disgrace to those who love glory. Repelling the enemy can be an offensive tactic when ambushes ensnare their heels. Men that come in the name of others may not always be willing to die for those who send them. Separate the man from the fantasy, and his desire to be revered will vanish. The crafty become invisible to enter a man's mind. When insanity occurs, no foul play is suspected. Fighting with the hands is unproductive. Telekinesis is the key to flawless victories. Surround yourself with the man's fears, and he will not proceed. Take a risk that the enemy cannot afford, and he will exit the competition. The future is a weapon that only one side can control. Once it is captured, it is lost forever. Those who cannot change the future have good reason to let go. Though many sigh in response to commands to turn back, there are also many who rejoice in their hearts. Hope for the weak to lead the strong, striking their minds removes the most threatening foes. Pray for the strong to lead the weak, striking their hearts enlists the support of the cowardly. Give a wild dog meat to send it away, and it will come back the next day. Litter the pathway with tacks, and it will never return. Once a journey begins, turning back takes much effort. The prudent wage war where the enemy is ill-equipped. Retreat is more likely to occur when it is a necessity. When a man is alone, he speaks softly. When surrounded by allies, he desires battle. A few rogues acting with speed create the same effect as many acting under orders. The aim of a shooter is more significant than the amount of guns in his arsenal. One gun in the hand of an average shooter yields 4 times as many casualties when operated by an expert marksman. When many are quickly slain in several locations, The murders are attributed to many suspects. The reach of an organization is often believed to be a reflection of its size. Its ability to hit key targets exaggerates an enemy's strength. The side that lacks manpower seems greater when it puts to use all its artillery. Deception can be used to increase the size of one's force. 1,000 men are strangers in the eyes of those who have never seen them before. Though the rapid movement of a few depletes stamina, it is a worthy endeavor if it instills fear. The enemy will move quickly against the last remnants of its adversary, but the existence of reinforcements suspends all movement. The enemy cannot set its eyes upon every man engaged in war against it. It must rely on reports and spies to estimate the size of its opponent. Documents can be forged and people can tell lies. Threats are only unbelievable without concrete evidence. Words have the power to send an enemy clamoring for peace. A false position is a vulnerable position. If the enemy sees through a deception, it will show no mercy. Rumors can transform a man into a monster. If the world fears monsters, discovering his humanity will be impossible. No one will have the courage to expose the truth. If the opposition will only back down in the face of superior forces, magnificent thespians must be employed to inflate the size of an inferior outfit. The fox cannot kill the rabbit when the cougar is near. The thief does not burglarize homes in the presence of authorities. He selects targets out of their radius. A man bold against the weak is negotiable when meeting an equal. When facing a superior force, the wise hide behind the strong. If the strong are not available to provide cover, the enemy is made to believe that they will arrive soon. If the consequences for a strike are detrimental to the enemy, it would be foolish for them to engage a feeble opponent. Manufacturing the possibility of dire outcomes can impede imminent threats. Even a child does not bully one who seems to have powerful friends. A stable relationship can serve as much as a deterrence as an alliance. To make assumptions is human nature. A brilliant strategist provides the enemy with images that cause it to assume the worst. The isolated enemy is at the mercy of the strong. A sociable rival is capable of receiving aid. A sensible man makes his enemies believe that he has large-scale support backing his maneuvers. Fools are immune to deception because they lack the basic ability to perceive, understand, and judge things. When lodged between two empires, a city-state sets neighbor against neighbor, even if only one party is determined to wage war. A dishonest man targets the mind of a victim. An ally does not have to enter the battlefield to be used against the enemy. The enemy will turn back when a threat makes it forget its desires. A conquest that leads to destruction is not a conquest at all. It is a suicide mission. Chapter 13. Puppet States. A puppet state is a government that is controlled in secret by a foreign entity. The ventriloquist of such a state is usually an empire. Though it has the power to dominate its enemy, the empire chooses to act in secret to avoid competition and criticism. Most puppet states are regions of contention. The state's open relationship with an empire would provoke interference from competitors. When it is believed that a state cannot be penetrated by foreign influence, most potential interlopers do not waste resources in attempts to form an alliance. When two nations have an interest in a particular region, they may make treaties that prevent both sides from confiscating the area to maintain peace. An empire may seize contested regions through covert activities to keep treaties intact. Criticism from the outside world also prevents empires from showing their hand in the affairs of a contested region. Interference and aid from an empire may be explicitly forbid in international agreements due to human rights violations by the state. Though military force may not be a consequence, diplomatic relations suffer when sanctions are violated. Operating behind the scenes allows the empire to smile in the face of its enemies and allies while committing acts of betrayal. Turning its prey into a puppet nation not only protects the empire in areas of politics and diplomacy, it also physically shields it from the backlash of the public over policies that are not suitable for the nation's inhabitants. When the people are angry, they direct their frustration toward their own government. The lives of those who carry out the will of the empire can be placed at risk. while their masters direct their movements from the safety of their homeland. The overall goal of the ventriloquist is to profit from a stable region. By waging war to seize an area, an empire greatly depletes its resources. Pawns, supplies, and weapons are placed as wagers during each battle. A puppet state keeps the economy of the empire stable while it is robbed of valuable resources. The sacrifices made to crooked officials are negligible when compared to the profits that are received. A puppet state cannot exist without a corrupt government. When a citizen shakes the hand of an empire's lackey, they do not hold on to humanity. They grip the paws of the enemy. A puppet state never impacts the people in a positive manner. The existence of one official that serves a foreign entity is proof that the system has been compromised. The faith of the people is dependent upon the belief that their public servants have their best interest in mind and at heart. Every facet of the government is questionable when it is controlled by outsiders. The citizens are in grave danger when greed fills the hearts of their leaders. Empires cannot discreetly invade a nation with leaders of integrity and honor. The role of a government is to protect its people. It cannot do so if it serves the interests of others. When they behave in ways that do not coincide with the empire's objectives, the people are subjected to the wrath of their own government. Laws are created to defend the rights of the people. They are meaningless when their architects, interpreters, and enforcers are all on the payroll of a foreigner. A puppet state tailors its laws to support the silent invader, not the voice of its citizens. Crimes are determined by the outsiders and laws are made to promote and protect their agenda. Punishments do not aim to rehabilitate. They are established to destroy any individual that interferes with the empire's conquest. The people do not intend to support foreigners when they pay taxes to the government. A puppet state takes the hard-earned income of citizens and lines the pockets of its master. At any moment, the economy could suffer dire losses. A ventriloquist state does not care about the condition of its puppet. All it considers is how it benefits from the relationship. A puppet state does not cater to the will of the people. Therefore, it is an enemy of the people and must be ousted if citizens intend to survive. When a state has enemies within its borders, it is vulnerable to outsiders. With their destiny in the hands of a foreigner, the people are not free to live, work, and breed with hope of a better future. If an empire can rape a nation of its resources without getting its hands dirty, it will do so until it is completely satisfied or the nation is dead. The puppet state can be destroyed by exposing its relationship with the enemy. Exposure is a puppet state's worst nightmare. Though officials make agreements with empires, if they are caught with their hands in the cookie jar, they are at the mercy of their citizens. While members of the empire enjoy protection of their guards, their puppets are compelled to dwell in the midst of guerrillas. Corrupt officials are forced to choose between their physical safety and the benefits received from outsiders. Individuals chosen to lead a puppet state are exceptional liars. To bring a puppet state down, the guerrilla masters the skill of revealing lies and becomes a devoted detective to expose corruption. Once the state's duplicity is revealed, there is no amount of double talk that can save the dishonest from the wrath of the crowd. The job of the guerrilla is to expose the evil of the enemy when the people are too blind to see or contemplate its involvement in their daily lives. No man appreciates being fooled. Deceptive acts committed on behalf of the enemy can fuel revolts and rebellions. Once an empire's treachery is exposed, it is subject to the will of its enemies. Competitors continually seek opportunities to paint rivals in a negative light or completely destroy them. Ripping a puppet state apart puts the lives of traitors in danger and the lands of intruders at risk of annihilation. Though violence is always suitable when the aim is to strike fear in the hearts of men, exposure and the risk of such can be enough to demolish a puppet state. The media can be used to expose a puppet state. It provides the best means to reach the masses quickly. Time is of the essence when facing the enemy. If corrupt officials are allowed to inform the empire of their exposure, it may be able to cover up its involvement in the state's affairs. The public is immediately notified of corruption to prevent traitors from saving themselves. The media can only be used if it presents facts without bias. If the puppet state has full control of the press, The media is the enemy and a target as well. Though it is difficult to steal the spotlight from the media, citizens can be informed of corruption through grassroots operations and with the presentation of concrete evidence. The loudest voice seems the most honest at times. The lies of the enemy must be drowned out. When the guerrilla cannot depend on the news outlets to inform citizens of the country's plight, he becomes a journalist with a gun. The movement takes it upon themselves to report corruption to the people, by any means necessary. Corruption stings can be used to catch corrupt officials in acts of betrayal. By catering to the vices of corrupt officials, their weaknesses can be exposed for the masses to make informed decisions about their stay in office and their existence on this planet. Corruption can be exposed by presenting officials with bribes or posing as the empire's emissaries. Providing proof of corruption is the only way to turn the people against their rulers. When the masses are allowed to see their representatives as the actual reptiles they are granted the freedom that was stolen from them by the empire. Information exposing the enemy's presence is gathered by force, coercion, or espionage. Coercing corrupt officials to confess their crimes and reveal the empire's involvement in the national affairs puts the guerrilla in a position of power. By getting an official to admit their wrongs and expose the enemy, the guerrilla becomes more influential than the empire. This advantage is necessary to gain the assistance of the crowd in repelling the enemy. The movement presents itself as the savior of the people and holds their best interests above all else to garner cooperation. The means of gaining confessions are irrelevant, so long as they remain a mystery to the masses. All that is required is that the guerrilla be the reason for the disclosure of the puppet state's existence. Confessions can be acquired through the use of interrogation or torture. These methods are used when there is concrete evidence of an official's corruption. The actual confession is used as more of a political tool than evidence. Publicized confessions also serve as deterrents. They warn potential traitors of the consequences that accompany cooperating with outsiders. Assassinations are used to limit the influence of foreigners when the corruption is minimal or not widespread. When only a few are corrupt and the empire does not have firm footing within the region, the birth of a puppet nation can be terminated. Assassinations can be public or discreet. Public executions are done to let the corrupt know that their lives are in danger and put their activities to halt. Silent assassinations are used to avoid the empire's detection. Though the empire finds comfort in ruling from afar, it will send hit squads to deal with opponents of its installed government. The guerrilla is not averse to engaging in a secret war, but they prefer the public's assistance in repelling the enemy. When dealing with the puppet state, the guerrilla may have the physical advantage. The empire cannot place many of its troops in the country without generating suspicion. Chapter 14. Pawns. An empire cannot exist without pawns. Empires are dependent upon pawns. The fall of a fighting force softens a nation's foundation. Pawns pave the way for the Oxfords of powerful men. Empires send the poor members of the populace to conquer the jungles that hold the treasures they desire. Some rulers send pawns to fetch their prizes because they lack the courage to meet enemies face to face. Others do so due to their belief that they are divine beings. Though victories can be gained through eliminating leaders, most conflicts are only considered to be resolved when all pawns are removed from the region. The guerrilla aims to slaughter all individuals connected with the enemy to sever its access to the region. When a feat of this magnitude is completed, the empire becomes disabled. When an empire is immobile, it may resort to employing mercenaries. Mercenaries can be fierce fighters. Their lack of value in the politics of a conflict can be a blessing or a curse. Their greed and apathy can cause mercenaries to engage in cruel and malicious acts against targets. Because they have no people to answer to, they do not see a need to feign honorable behavior. Mercenaries are willing to do what the enlisted man cannot. They have no values. They are animals who fight for spoils and nothing else. In the short term, mercenaries can provide good results for the empire. They are best used in campaigns that last less than 1 year. Soldiers of fortune become a burden to the empire when contracted for too long. Their loyalty to wealth may seem to make them easy outfits to control. However, it is the same devotion that makes them unruly. Pawns live under the rule of their commanders. Once they complete their mission, they return home to serve the empire. Mercenaries have no ties to the land of their sponsor. They are free to abandon their task without fear of reprisal. Though pawns have the power to turn against the empire, mercenaries are more likely to do so. Without strong troops, the empire can use puppet states to complete its objectives. Puppet states are also more likely than pawns to commit acts of betrayal. Economic warfare can be implemented by an empire that lacks manpower. In times of war, the economies of the world become unstable. By becoming a neutral state, an empire can keep its economy steady amid turmoil. Using its riches to play both sides of a conflict allows the empire to become the world's bank. Acting as a financial stronghold protects it from invasion because it is an asset to all governments. Though its wealth may be able to protect it from conventional forces, pawns are required to protect it from adversaries that have no desire to do business. If an empire is deficient in manpower, it could decide to be a peaceful nation and pursue equality, justice, and honor. However, the nature of man does not allow him to look upon the peaceful with respect when there is an object he wants to attain. A passive empire is a foolish empire. It will get the destruction it craves. The guerrilla defeats pawns by getting to know them. It is said that a friend is a man's worst enemy. The guerrilla befriends the enemy with or without his knowledge. Gaining access into a foe's homeland allows research to be done on their background. A man's culture reflects his true nature. Some men are raised to be brave. Others are raised to be gentle. A man's upbringing impacts his behavior on the battlefield. The type of infiltrator sent abroad, aka the foreign student, is one with the ability to blend in the targeted region. Their presence does not arouse suspicion or alert the five senses of civilians. They seem to belong in the atmosphere naturally or as approved visitors. Foreign students look for individuals and institutions that provide opportunities to study the enemy. Institutions of higher learning are the most common targets. They provide contacts and education useful to the cause. Individuals at universities are the most open members of a society. They are eager to learn about others and dispense their knowledge. The curriculums at schools can aid the foreign student with skills transferable to the battlefield. A friendship can be used to guide an exploration of the enemy's culture. Becoming familiar with the society's popular beliefs allows the movement to determine the sort of propaganda that can be used against it. Opinions about war provide the most beneficial perspective. When most of the population view war as an unnecessary action, the movement can gain sympathy from the empire's citizens. If the people view war as an integral component to their survival as a nation, this belief can be used to paint hostiles as more of a threat than a safety measure. Gathering thorough information on the family values of the enemy can reveal the sacrifices pawns are willing to make for the state. When the success and the survival of one's family is tied to the glory of the empire, pawns may feel obligated to fight for the state. If outcomes on the battlefield impose little or no change on their home life, pawns may be reluctant to risk their lives for victory. A society's customs can reveal some of the enemy's vulnerabilities. Customs are generally habits. Such behaviors are hard to stop even when at war. Societal rituals are usually conducted in times of comfort and peace. Pawns hold on to their customs with the enemy at their heels. A foreign student can learn when they are most vulnerable to attack by becoming familiar with these activities. A pawn's attitude about life can be used to determine how they will treat the inhabitants of a region when sent to invade. Ethnocentric pawns can be expected to treat the people with disrespect and brutality. The guerrilla prefers to combat these individuals because citizens would be obligated to support the movement. The hatred that accompanies swaggering men ensures rife commitment to the cause. Compassionate pawns may signify a threat to the guerrilla's popularity, but they represent a conflict with limited civilian casualties. A foe that shows mercy to the innocent grants the movement the freedom to fight strictly on the battlefield. The ambitions of a man drive him to don armor and pick up a sword. The foreign student familiarizes himself with the enemy's desires. A man who fights for equality will not get it in the service of his oppressor. A man who fights for riches will not find prosperity in the service of the wealthy. A man who fights for the sake of fighting will lose heart in the face of death. A man who fights for the love of the empire pursues an adulterous entity. Pawns do not even earn 1/1,000,000% of the riches they are sent to capture. When pawns invade their homeland to satisfy their thirst, the guerrilla poisons every well in the country. A foreign student can gain insight into the shape of the empire's forces. The mouth is an indication of the mind. The foreign students gain knowledge of the type of technology prevalent on the side of the enemy. All acquired information is used to create defensive strategies. Chapter 15. Lone Wolves. A guerrilla that carries out missions for the cause without communication with other members is a lone wolf. Unconnected lone wolves are independent creatures who familiarize themselves with the movement and pursue victory without confiding in others. By nature, every guerrilla has the capacity to become a lone wolf. This situation may occur if the surveillance of the enemy makes it difficult to coordinate activities. Acting alone helps avoid detection, capture, infiltration, and betrayal. One man can blend into a crowd better than three. It is easier to control your own actions than it is to manage the behaviors of others. When one man pursues an objective, he limits the factors out of his control. War is a game of dominance and control. Many variables create a high probability of failure. A lone wolf has the confidence to move without guidance or support. A guerrilla must be able to escape captors to further the cause. The more men involved in a mission, the better the chances are for the enemy to capture a minor victory. The cause cannot afford to give the enemy any sort of triumph. Though all guerrillas are trained to stay silent, there are always weak members mixed up in every organization. The lone wolf tactic can be used to limit the chances of placing a possible informant in the hands of the enemy. Men are not loyal by nature. It is a behavior that arises through a commitment to a force outside of oneself. The world provides much proof that men are liable to engage in lip service. When betrayal is exposed, it is usually for men who were never steadfast in their faithfulness to begin with. It is impossible to be stabbed in the back when one pursues goals independently. When surveillance itself becomes the enemy, one's dealings and relationships are closely scrutinized. It is better to have no one than to have many who can provide one's biography to the enemy. Forming new relationships can be a dangerous activity. The enemy infiltrates the movement by fanning support. When a man prefers to be left alone, there is no need for him to fear betrayal. Lone wolves are either connected to the cause or are driven to action by their belief in its objective. They take it upon themselves to carry out missions. Men who are not actually connected to the movement make the best lone wolves because they give the enemy no reason to view them as threats. They are able to completely blend into crowds because they have no history attached to the cause whatsoever. These fighters are useful in carrying attacks out on the Empire's soil because their physical features may not match those of the guerrilla. Lone wolves born behind enemy lines are natural members of the enemy's culture. They know when, where, and how to move to avoid detection. Though a foreigner can carry out attacks within the Empire as a lone wolf, their unfamiliarity with the region presents risks. When the cause has suffered major defeats within their homeland, members may resort to becoming lone wolves to keep the movement alive. Black flag operations are inevitable. The lone wolf avoids following orders and creating allies to limit their impact. The enemy is not above posing as individuals connected to the cause. The guerrilla does not hide their agenda. It is easy for the enemy to act in a manner similar to members of the cause. When an attack does nothing but strengthen the enemy's resolve, it is likely that it came from outside of the movement. The lone wolf trusts no one and does not reveal their allegiance to the cause until their mission is complete. If a lone wolf cannot get the supplies and weapons they need to accomplish a mission without excessive assistance, they do not move. It is better to do nothing than do something that endangers the movement. At times, the lone wolf aims to alert the enemy of his presence. War is always a game of resources. When the enemy concentrates on defending its strongholds, there are many obstacles to victory. When the enemy goes on the hunt, it allocates portions of its defensive resources to support offensive operations. Every day spent pursuing a lone wolf is a day spent with less security in areas that need protection. The lone wolf makes the enemy believe that he is more than one man. This strategy is especially significant when the task is hitting the enemy state. The Empire enjoys the luxury of having the power to destabilize other regions, but it panics at the mere notion of a foreign enemy behind its borders. A lone wolf can proliferate the apparent presence of the movement by the sheer size and speed of attacks on the Empire. The enemy may lack the intelligence to discover that the destruction imposed on their region is the result of a lone wolf. However, the Empire is usually too proud to allow the public to believe that one man can inflict a massive amount of damage upon its domain. There can be no victory unless the enemy knows what the movement wants. Each attack carried out serves to convey the enemy's desires. The lone wolf finds ways to communicate with the enemy through their actions. The Empire may manipulate the public and offer lies to explain incidents, but that is unimportant. As long as the enemy knows what is needed to bring an end to assaults on its region, the cause can claim victory. A lone wolf does not rest. He plots and carries out missions until the enemy surrenders. Sometimes the goal of the mission is to provoke responses from the enemy that are just minor steps to victory. When the behavior of the enemy can be controlled by certain acts, the situation must be taken advantage of. Though hypocritical conduct makes a man of honor uneasy, it is unusual for the exploited to not accept the opportunity to enslave their oppressors when given the chance to do so. When full control of the enemy is acquired, the question is not when victory will be achieved, but how. When the goal is destabilization, targets are hit that aid the enemy's incursions. Every resource kept out of the hand of the enemy saves the life of a guerrilla. Every man robbed of his chance to participate in waging war against the movement is one less man the guerrilla must face in battle. Every weapon that is destroyed before reaching the hands of a pawn eliminates thousands of rounds fired upon the guerrilla. Every meal poisoned reduces the amount of days the enemy can survive overseas. The lone wolf and the spy share similar goals. However, they are driven by different forces. The spy has contacts within the cause. The lone wolf is completely independent. His directives are the product of the movement's basic goals. When the enemy is destabilized by a lone wolf, there is no need to inform the movement. The results of such an action are visible to the entire world. The cause is structured to act upon any weakness exhibited by the enemy. Acts that do not pertain to eliciting a concrete victory are considered a waste of time. If embarrassing an empire lures it into a trap, or causes it to make a mistake, it is an approved activity. Stealth is a lone wolf's partner in crime. Silent and long-distance strikes protect the lone wolf from identification and capture. Weapons that support such tactics are used during operations. The weapons available depend on the technology available in the environment. The best lone wolves are innovative beings. Civilian targets are usually avoided. Hostility towards innocents only creates more enemies for the cause. To remain undetected, the lone wolf makes the masses uninterested in its capture. Attacks are focused on the empire and not the people. If removal of its forces from foreign regions is required, the empire is assaulted until such actions occur. When the enemy ignores the demands of the movement, the size and intensity of the attacks increase. The lone wolf is secure, as long as his identity remains a secret. When waging war against the enemy, every precaution is taken to avoid discovery. An enemy in possession of one eyelash can do more harm than an enemy armed with a rifle. The lone wolf strikes the enemy without giving it a target to retaliate against. They do not follow orders. They receive their directives from a knowledge of the cause and its aims or booklets produced and distributed by the movement. When necessary, the guerrilla communicates with comrades through pages of manuals. Instruction booklets provide strategies for fighters and lone wolves to follow in their pursuit of victory. These publications also inform sympathizers of the movement's objectives and ideology. The power of a manual is immense. Though paper and data can be erased, the memory of such information cannot be expunged from the mind of the living. Chapter 16: False Flags. It is easier to deceive a man than to convince him of the truth. A false flag, or a black flag, is an operation that places the blame or credit for an activity on an entity that was either minimally involved or completely uninvolved. False flags are mainly carried out for political purposes. Men never need a legitimate reason to engage in warfare against one another. Excuses are only created to appease outsiders and participants. Black flags are simply justifications for war or actions that would be viewed as extremely hostile without just cause. When an empire executes a false flag, it does not care who is put at risk. If the destruction of a neutral party allows the empire to freely pursue its goals, it will bring about its ruin and place the blame on its enemy. An empire is not above sacrificing its citizens, neighbors, and allies to win an argument. When the world is against its rationale for warfare, it finds a way to make everyone conform to its views. The goal is to make its enemy seem to be a threat to global stability, so much so that even the empire's competitors are obligated to support campaigns against them. When an empire is familiar with its enemy, it can send men to commit crimes in their name. Once a freedom fighter is viewed as a terrorist by the world, the empire has won half the battle against him. Because the empire is heartless by nature, it is capable of being ruthless against its own people. It will sacrifice thousands to wage war against hundreds. When the people are at peace, the empire uses terror to push them onto the battlefield. False flag operations carried out on citizens is akin to the state waging war on its own people. The only difference between the two activities is who the people perceive the enemy to be. The guerrilla is extremely vulnerable to false flag operations. Because they operate as an unofficial organization and do not expose themselves to the enemy, the guerrilla can be easily imitated. They wear no uniform. They have no base of operations. Any man can arise from the darkness and claim to be a member of the cause. The voice of the empire is louder in its homeland than that of the guerrilla. Though it may not be able to convince the entire world of its version of events, it can surely convince its sheep. Lines of communication are used sparingly by the movement. If members must repeatedly exonerate themselves, sooner or later the enemy will track them down. Many false flag operations go uncontested by reliable sources. Silence is usually taken as an affirmation of guilt by the public. The people will turn against the movement if they believe that the cause is a guise to rob, rape, and murder. The empire can use false flag operations to paint the guerrilla as pillagers of their own communities. Individuals who share the nationality of members in the movement are recruited to carry out attacks against the community while claiming allegiance to the cause. Recruits can be found within the portions of the population that disagree with the movement's strategies or feel no obligation to defend the cause. Money can inspire many men to participate in lies. Factions within the cause can be used to betray the movement and engage in false flags. These groups may submit to the empire due to internal conflicts and weak leadership. Creating and taking advantage of internal strife can help set up false flags. It is difficult for the guerrilla to carry out a black flag operation against the empire. Because it controls the information its citizens receive, the movement can rarely convince the invaders' people of its crimes. The cause has better sway over its own people when the enemy has taken the lives of the innocent. No excuses are accepted from the killers of babies and adolescents. The guerrilla is not defenseless against false flags. To protect themselves, the guerrilla makes their agenda and targets clear. Once the line is drawn, no one within the movement crosses it. If anyone violates the rules of engagement established by the organization, they are promptly removed from service. The cause also differentiates itself from similar groups and distances itself from compromised groups. Many groups within a region may take it upon themselves to repel an empire. Though the guerrilla does not protest taking advantage of their victories, They do not make a commotion about their methods if they violate their codes of conduct. The movement is not obligated to police their peers. However, they do put forth great effort in characterizing themselves as distinctly different from other fighters within the region. When necessary, groups are eliminated that severely compromise their reputation. The guerrilla reverses false flags upon the enemy by pretending to be complicit in his plans. When approached by agents of the Empire, the guerrilla may agree to cooperate in order to gain weapons and supplies. The enemy may even assign an apparent traitor the mission of using a weapon of mass destruction to massacre civilians. When the guerrilla receives their arsenal, they may be able to unleash it upon the Empire or expose its treachery to the world, thus reversing the Black Flag operation. However, it is highly unlikely an empire would arm its enemies without multiple security measures prepared in advance. So much for guerrilla warfare. This has been The Art of Guerrilla Warfare, written by J.J. Tucker, narrated by Drama Simpson.